Discovery Houston, press to ATO.
Liftoff of mission 41D, the first flight of the orbit Discovery, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Three, two, one, zero, zero.
Discovery, go and throttle up.
Discovery's 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
Today's going to be pretty simple. I'm not feeling that great. Probably not too long of a stream. We're just going to play some Warhammer and watch some videos that I queued up. First one we're gonna watch is John Doyle's new video they just dropped.
There's nothing more powerful than you making your thing happen. Really going for it.
I know what you're thinking. All these things going on in the world right now, World War III, mass acts of violence, certainly all these things can't just be happening right now coincidentally. And you're right, but honestly, it's really just more of the same. You know, people pick up on it at different times, but really it's been going on for a while now. Maybe it's accelerated recently, but I mean, think about it. Why do you think they've corrupted and destroyed the influence of the church so that our women attend these Halloween parties dressed like prostitutes, so that young men of upstanding character will have no interest in attending them? Or otherwise, nobody goes at all because they're just going to get shot up because they've strategically installed these district attorneys who will simply release criminals from prison or just refuse to prosecute them in the first place. Why do you think they've propagandized our society into embracing political correctness and cancel culture so that you can't dress up as anything funny anymore? I need you to remember, these people are trying to start World War III to distract you from carving pumpkins, because then all the evil spirits would be scared away and the bad guys would lose. Few understand this, but we understand this. The war on Halloween is real, folks, and it's right here. It's right in front of us, but it's okay. I will not let you down. The spirit of Robert E. Lee appeared to me in a vision after he was released from the statue before ascending into heaven. He told me the absolute best thing I can do right now to fight the bad guys is to autistically overanalyze Halloween movies in accordance with my worldview. And if I do this, I'm granted amnesty for my Yankee heritage. Don't have to tell me twice. Yes, sir, General Lee. I'll take it from here. But it is true. The entire genre of Halloween movies, horror movies, it does tend to be one of the more explicitly right-wing genres of media. And it is important to have a trained eye with popular culture because, as I'm sure you know, something like 80% of everything that comes out of the average person's mouth is in reference to pop culture, the latest thing, etc. Also, the most effective medium of disseminating information that's actually going to be retained by people is and always has been storytelling. And so there is actually some utility in these sorts of discussions. And some of them, yeah, are less serious, but some of them do actually contain some pretty important points about the changing cultural and political landscape of our society, especially throughout the last several decades. So there are some important themes and motifs that we should cover, but honestly, that's all more or less a rationalization. We're doing it because it's fun and I want to. So I will provide to you the correct analyses of these films for your Halloween mirth, merriment, and otherwise general enjoyment, and we will all be better off for it, except George Soros. He will literally tickle himself in a panic if you watch this video all the way through, because we will go over whether the horror genre is left-wing or right-wing, some brief themes of each, why it's significant, how those themes have changed throughout America's cultural landscape throughout the decades, how it's used to both subvert and affirm our traditional standards, why so many leftists love it and want to claim it, whether it's even possible to make good left-wing horror, and then, of course, our tremendous list, which will continue and expand upon these discussions. So do stay tuned.
John Doyle in. Heck off, commie.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Heck Off Commie. You know, I can't just start the list, right? I have things to say first. But do you like my Halloween costume? I'm going as guy who has the correct take on literally every movie ever and who likes pumpkins. Okay, here's the thing. I get it, we're all excited here. I have to lay down some ground rules first. First of all, I get messages now all the time from people who are just memeing it too hard. Oh, John, is this inherently right-wing? What about this? Is this implicitly right-wing inherently? Stop it. You're being disordered. It's too entropic. You're flying too close to the sun, like a liberal. I did not come out and declare that Beauty and the Beast was implicitly right-wing because it was funny. I did it because it was sexist and vaguely anti-LGBT, depending upon your position on the Beast furry question. The point is, things actually have to be right-wing. Otherwise, you're just being stupid and subjective. That's left-wing. Now, that being said, there are some honorable mentions. Sure, this is not a definitive list. This is just 5 things that immediately came to mind. I'm also not commanding you to go watch these movies necessarily. Some of them are pretty rough, and I, of course, disavow all violence, etc., etc. Look, I'm just a film critic. I'm just a guy who likes ideas. And speaking of ideas, I will be debating key Gamergate figure Brianna Wu on November 6th at the University of South Carolina on the issue of pornography. Some of you may be too young to understand the significance of this, but you should still all definitely come watch. I'll put a link in the description where you can get tickets and more information. Nice. Anyways, speaking of honorable mentions, that reminds me of another thing. The things we discuss have to be central to the plot. Like Friday the 13th, for example, after I tweeted my review of the Super Mario Bros. Movie and Scream 6, I had a guy ask if I endorsed Jason Voorhees as an example of vigilante Christian justice. So I thought about it. Is he one of our guys? Okay, well, doesn't talk. That's probably autism. Punishes sinners. He's got mommy issues. It's arch nemesis. Preys upon children. Like, okay, yeah, I'm thinking this is our guy. Or even something like the original Black Christmas from 1974, which John Carpenter took a lot of inspiration from for Halloween, particularly in the cinematography. That movie, of course, sparking the popularity of slasher films. So you could argue that's all thanks to Black Christmas. Maybe Texas Chainsaw Massacre too. But anyways, the guy in Black Christmas, he's basically like an autistic incel, which if you haven't seen that movie, you should definitely check it out. It's genuinely unsettling. But like, what kind of message does that send? You know, like, yeah, can the character be literally me? Yeah. It doesn't necessarily make it a right-wing Halloween movie. You know, we have to play by the rules. Also, I have to be responsible with my messaging, okay? It hurts the movement if I come out and say, top 5 right-wing Halloween movies. And then the reason for each one is that the guy's an autistic incel, okay? That makes us look bad. I can't be doing that. President Trump needs me to not do that. It's reckless. It's irresponsible. We are cool and well-adjusted guys, actually. But yeah, the themes in the story are important. It can't be something too obvious, something explicit, obviously. Like, it can't just be, oh, you know, The Exorcist, demons are real, Hereditary, women are crazy, also demons are real. Like, it has to be implicit. And it can't be something like They Live, where the messaging is very obvious. And people will say, okay, well, where do you draw the line then? I don't know. Guess we'll find out. Because some people will say the messaging in a movie like Invasion of the Body Snatchers is really obvious, with the whole take of, well, it's about McCarthyism, and McCarthyism is so crazy and silly. It's like, bro, that's what happened. They were right. And people say that's a good example of left-wing horror, which I think is absurd, because that entire genre, like science fiction, movies that deal with things of that nature, those are all very right-wing, because the essential conflicts in a lot of these movies are about us versus them, fears of subversion by foreign populations, loss of identity, et cetera, et cetera. And so they'll take that and they'll be like, well, given the cultural context at the time, it's actually left-wing. And it's like, okay, you know, this is a recurring theme with these people, because I honestly don't know if it's possible to really make left-wing horror. Like, it's been done before, which we'll discuss a pretty good example of in a minute, but It's very difficult. Most people who try to do this just fail because you look at anything that claims to be left-wing horror and it's going to be like some 20th century critique of consumerism, and it's like, yeah, same. Like, who says we like consumerism? But in criticizing consumerism, of course, they really mean to criticize capitalism, because obviously leftists are not anti-consumerism. Leftists are actually the let people enjoy things crowd. So it's not that. It's just that they're class insecure and they're projecting that outwards onto the world, because nobody serious on the right is against criticizing capitalism. But it's very difficult for leftists to properly critique capitalism because their motives for doing so are not disinterested, because they're driven by resentment. And so they'll highlight consumerism or they'll highlight material inequality, both of which are to basically say, I'm mad that I don't get to buy things that other people get to buy, which is affirmed clearly by the fact that every time one of these people finds a way to make a living being resentful about inequality, they always keep it for themselves and just go buck wild, which I don't care about. Like, do what you're going to do, but we can't let these people think that they have any moral claim to any issue we face, even capitalism, which we still win the debate on against them or neocons or whomever. And so this is the problem. And this is common with a lot of movies in general nowadays, where they'll use the traditional themes of a right-wing horror movie to serve an ultimately progressive agenda by just plugging in a bunch of left-wing nonsense into them. Like the actual components of the story, the mechanics of it, how they affect each other, those don't convey a left-wing message. It'll just be like, Candyman, black people have a tough time. Whites are evil. Get Out, whites are evil. Alien, female protagonist, therefore girl power. Like maybe in the 60s or 70s, you'll have something that was vaguely anti-war, maybe, and so they'll claim it, but it's always just the little details. It's like icing on the cake or whatever.
Anti-war.
And, they're just horror movies that maybe are accented with depictions of colonization, oppression, classism, inequality, etc. But at that point, those are just cosmetic features. Like, it would have to be at its core left-wing. Or a lot of times, a movie will be left-wing just because of how vulgar and subversive it is to our cultural standards. And they'll take pride in making something like that. So,
I do, but I can't.
Sometimes it's left-wing in the sense that the message is progressive, but in a much more real sense, it's left-wing because the message is retarded and subversive and defiant to reality. Or a lot of times, it'll just be like you took any dozen classic horror movies, you reduce those to an aggregate template, and then you just make that movie 100 times, but you just cycle between the villains. Like, okay, this one, the white people are scary, then the colonizers, then the men, et cetera, et cetera. It's just lazy. It's just like bloodlust porn for libtards. And we don't get to make movies like that, depicting our enemies with all the caricatures, all these insane scenarios. We just actually have to live with them and observe their behavior. And you know what the biggest irony is? The biggest fans of horror movie consumerism are libtards. Like the kill count guy loves gore, but gets mad if a movie objectifies women. Yikes, my guy. Can we maybe not do that? You're dumb. Yeah, me when a cameraman focuses on a woman's body. I disagree with having to see this. Just say you're gay. Like, we could have a whole discussion constructing a model of these types of people, because you'd think to yourself, okay, why are all the biggest diehard fans of these McHorror films, which contain terribly violent things, in many cases happening to people, why are these people the same people who would pride themselves on being so empathetic and so understanding? And the answer is because what these people get off to, above all else, isn't being empathetic and understanding. It's being empathetic and understanding to people who seek to subvert traditional American society. It's the same thing with the movies, which are in many cases made for the sake of being as brutal and disgusting and gory as possible. You look at the people who really like those movies, they're all leftists. And it's because they get off to the vulgarity and the offensiveness of the material. Sure, there's definitely a component to it that's just about channeling the natural instinct to see violence that we all have. With them in particular, there's probably a dark spiritual component to it as well. But I really believe that they just love subverting what they regard to still be in a position to be subverted. So it might seem like there's a hypocrisy or a double standard to their behavior, but there isn't. Like, it's all directed at the same enemy, which is just us. That's honestly the worst part of it to me. Not even like the subversion or the edginess, but that it thinks it is. Like, it's just this cringe, faux edginess. Like, you've got these people and they're just beating the corpses of moral authorities that have been dead in our culture for a while. They're trying to act like it's so edgy. Bro, did you just attack Christianity? Are you attacking the nuclear family? You're attacking men? You're attacking white people. Wow. Dude, that's so punk rock. That's so transgressive. What are you going to do next? This guy can't be stopped. It's like, this is why it's difficult to make left-wing horror, because so much of what we understand horror to be is about the unnatural threatening the natural order, and so much of leftism is just unnatural. And you can manipulate the audience's perception of the story by highlighting certain characters and events in different ways. But when you really think about these stories and what's going on, it's hard to see how they're accomplishing what they think they are. Like, when you watch one of these movies, we're typically rooting for the maintaining of the normal order against some outside threat, against something unnatural. Or sometimes when we are rooting for the bad guy, it'll be when he's, killing degenerate teenagers, or when he's punishing bad people in a twisted form of vigilantism, something like in Saw, which is inherently right-wing, by the way, that whole idea of the vigilante, because the outsourcing of justice to capable citizens presupposes the collapse or the decline of the liberal order, which can no longer sufficiently protect its people and deliver justice. And honestly, I think that's why in the last decade or so, these superhero stories have become so extravagant with their villains and storylines, because broadly
Damn, why do I
speaking,
have...
if it were still just about criminals, people might be compelled to think about, the world we live in a little bit harder, what we choose to let people get away with, how it affects our society, who these people are, things like that. So instead, it's about space aliens and time travel and quantum physics and the multiverse, whatever. Not a perfect comparison, but there's still some truth there. But yeah, there's an argument that they'll make, which is that the genre is left-wing because it's inherently subversive and vulgar, and it goes against repression in terms of the content. That does happen, but it doesn't have to happen. It's not required to fit the model that we're talking about. But that's why when you look at the types of people who really love the movies that are made purely for the sake of being disgusting and horrifically violent, like for that in itself, it adds up. So I don't know. The bottom line is that for the profile of the average horror fanatic being a leftist to be used as evidence that the genre is in itself inherently left-wing, that would require me to concede that leftists are reliable narrators and not completely misaligned with reality, which I won't do. Also, I did the research. I looked up lists of left-wing horror movies. They're all wrong. Like, they'll take any movie and be like, a surplus repression of patriarchal capitalist societies. And it's like, it's not that deep. I heard some people say Parasite's a good example. I guess it critiques class or whatever. I would have to see it. The problem is, though, for it to really be good, it has to ultimately tie back into something that exists in the real world. If it's just drawing from or inspired by a fake narrative in society that's completely untrue, like most of these left-wing horror movies do, it's not really doing what it's trying to do. It's basically nothing more than propaganda. It's like that tweet, guy who's only seen Boss Baby watching his second movie. I'm getting a lot of Boss Baby vibes from this. It's like the same thing with these people. They're so consumed and preoccupied with these fake narratives that they see a movie which echoes them and they're like, this is just like real life. This is like really smart, actually. This says a lot about society. Moreover, critiquing class in Korea is a lot different than critiquing class in America, but the libtard mind, it cannot conceive of this because they look at South Korea, which is comprised virtually of all ethnic Koreans, and they look at America and they're like, I don't get it. Like, we have two countries of individuals. Why can't we just compare these? So yeah, I would have to take some time and really compile a list, but I don't think it's possible, generally, especially nowadays, to have truly good left-wing horror films. I think that notorious shitlib Stephen King got it right when he said the entire genre is inherently reactionary. Something like Smile is a good recent example of this, actually, which honestly I thought was a good movie where it's like, yeah, it's scary or whatever, but the ultimate message is about generational trauma and passing it down and mental health and healing and growing, which is like the whole liberal understanding of human psychology. So that was pretty cringe, but I did appreciate at the end where they were basically like, LOL, psych, it never goes away. So who knows? Maybe the director's our guy.
Wait, what movie was this?
But the ultimate message is about generational trauma and passing it down and mental health and healing and growing, which is like the whole liberal understanding of human psychology. So that was pretty cringe, but I did appreciate at the end where they were basically like, LOL, psych, it never goes away. So who knows? Maybe the director's our guy. But yeah, that's their formula. They want to take the general themes of a right-wing horror movie and then just plug their moralism into it, particularly with the bloodlust stuff against whichever villain is due, which contextually does make it left-wing because then it's meant to inspire resentment towards the remaining living impediments to their agenda. But the class-based stuff doesn't really do that as much. Like, that movie is ultimately trying to say, oh, inequality is bad. But then it's like, okay, that's not left-wing so much because of that, but more so because it's like delusional and insane. Or they'll also say that horror films became more left-wing when the source of the evil shifted from being some outside threat, a creature, a monster, whatever, to being inside of us. Anybody could be brought to this point, and maybe that's supposed to subvert our understanding of morality and conduct. But that's not the part that does that. Because right-wing people are not optimistic about human nature. So what makes these stories left-wing isn't so much that they shift the evil to us rather than them. It's that they take it farther by trying to basically excuse the evil, attribute it to environmental factors, make us sympathize with it, and basically view morality overall as less objective and more circumstantial. And John Carpenter had an interesting take on this, which I disagree with, actually. But we're getting too carried away here. But yeah, it's sort of meta, I guess. Like, horror movies are right-wing. Horror movies can be left-wing. Horror movies that claim to be left-wing are incoherent, which makes them right-wing because the ultimate takeaway is that liberals are retarded, which is in alignment with the natural order. That's the takeaway with one of these movies. You know, it's like the message is not what is intended, but Wow, imagine believing something so stupid that you actually produce a movie about it. Crazy. These guys are just as bad as I thought. All right, time for your self-improvement advice. Got a little bit of a cold, boys, but it doesn't matter. Sometimes you can make your day a whole lot better and more enjoyable by changing something small, like wearing comfortable clothing. And for you guys, it starts with your boxers. That's why I started promoting Undertack, the most comfortable pair of men's boxers I've ever worn in horror as a genre, etc. We can do that later if you want. This is going to be fun. If we learn a thing or two along the way, great. All right, so getting started in no particular order. Got to start with this one, though, because it's a nice transition from what we were just talking about. Number 1, Halloween, the original John Carpenter film from 1978. Funny story with this one. I've always loved horror movies. I remember the first time I saw this, I was with my dad. I think I was maybe like 7 or 8, honestly. And he'd been telling me for my entire life, this is the scariest movie ever made. People were walking out of the theaters when this came out. I don't even know if that's true, but we started watching it. I was so freaked out by what I thought was going to happen that I think I only made it to the part where Laurie's like walking home and then Michael Myers just like emerges from this bush and then goes back behind the bush. And I was like, okay, can't do this anymore because I got myself so worked up about what I thought I was going to see. But yeah, the original Halloween from 1978. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to spoil it. You've had plenty of time. Essentially, it begins with a 6-year-old Michael Myers killing his sister on Halloween night 1963 with a knife that he retrieved from the kitchen after he's left at home with her and she's messing around with her boyfriend. His parents come home. He's standing outside dressed in a clown costume with this look on his face, still holding the knife with his sister's blood on it. And his parents take off the mask and just imagine what they're going to see when they go inside. Really quickly, people will say that the whole slasher genre is right-wing because the victims are typically teenagers who are partying, sinning, dabbling with the occult or whatever. There's something to be said about that, certainly. Just like there's a lot of stuff out there already analyzing different sci-fi films through this lens, particularly with the us versus them motif. But I want to focus on some other components which I think are worth discussing here. So this opening scene, very iconic, and it depicts well what a lot of people will say is the left-wing transition within horror films starting maybe in the 60s, but definitely in the 70s, which is that the evil comes from within. It can be anybody, etc. And John Carpenter, actually, who directed this film and wrote this film, who's also called the master of horror, he said something interesting about this, which we just alluded to, so I'll play that right now. So take a listen.
It's one of the two scary stories that we can tell. One is the evil is inside or the evil is outside. Right-wing evil is always outside. It's them. Different color skin, different way they talk is different. Now that goes way back to us tribal. We're sitting around the campfire and we've just come out of the trees. And the witch doctor says, I'll tell you where evil is. It's out there in the woods, in the darkness. It's the next tribe. And they're going to come in here and things will be impure. And they'll take you over. That's right-wing evil. Left-wing evil, same situation. We're sitting around the campfire. Witch doctor gets up and says, I'll tell you where evil is. It's right in here, and he points to his heart. It's in each of us. We have the capability to commit evil. The good man chooses not to and fights against those impulses.
The reason his model doesn't work is because the right-wing view of human nature can actually fit both of these models, which he assigns individually to the right and to the left. Like what he says about left-wing horror, that we're all vulnerable and it's only through strength and discipline that we can choose to be good. That's not left-wing because that is a skeptical view of human nature. That's right-wing. The left-wing view of human nature is that people are basically good, and when they do things that aren't good, it's because of socioeconomic factors, neurochemical imbalances, which they can't control, etc. Because since we're all the same, if people behave differently, well, it can only be because they were introduced to circumstances which compelled them to do that. We're all the same function, we just get different inputs, and that's unfair, so we have to address that at a societal and institutional level. It can acknowledge wrongdoing only within the context of ultimately placing blame for that wrongdoing on something that is external, something that's totally separate. And conversely, left-wing horror, like we mentioned, can still use those themes of us versus them, subversion, etc., but they will do so in service of ultimately vilifying men, white people, Western civilization, etc. So it's not so black and white, I don't think. And the reason we know this is true, by the way, is because in his own movie, Halloween, when we get that shot of young Michael Myers, that's what he's alluding to right there, like that the evil can be within anyone. It doesn't have to just be within some outgroup. It could be within a peaceful Midwestern suburb. Okay, well, what is the rest of the movie saying, though? who are our protagonists. So the rest of the movie follows Dr. Loomis and Laurie. Michael Myers is sent to an insane asylum following the murder of his sister. 15 years later, Dr. Loomis is there to escort him to court to see if he's going to continue to be incarcerated. Michael escapes, he steals a car, and the rest of the movie is Dr. Loomis trying to hunt him down while he terrorizes a bunch of small-town teenagers, kills people, and at one point I think he eats a dog. Very general outline, but throughout this movie there are several frustrated moments where Dr. Loomis has these monologues where he's trying to communicate to people that he's been watching Michael Myers for the last 15 years. He's the epitome of pure evil. He cannot be reasoned with or rehabilitated. He must simply be stopped, or else he's just going to keep hurting people. And so the reason it's right wing is just in the way that it treats Michael Myers, particularly with his relationship to Dr. Loomis, who, may I remind you, is technically a mental health professional. It's like the Mystery Grove tweet, right? You know, you look at modern horror, whether it's Smile or the Babadook, and it's like, oh, wow, this is such a smart metaphor. We just all have just this generational trauma, and if we repress it and don't heal and grow and take SSRIs, and we risk passing it down to others, versus Dr. Loomis just like, I'm going to medically diagnose you as evil and then shoot you with a gun. Like, that's awesome. That makes sense to me. Oh, Michael Myers just needs a social worker. No, he needs to be shot. Do not read too deeply into that. I'm just like, the point is, it doesn't matter if the evil is coming from the out group or from within. It's a way of understanding evil that says, look, we have to be realistic about this person, hold them accountable. They're not a victim. They were not victim of some circumstance. By all apparent measures, this guy grew up in a very nice home with a very nice family. He murders his sister still, and he's going to continue murdering people. Like, we have to deal with that. The liberal understanding of psychology, incarceration, it focuses on mental health being harmed by trauma, and prison as a means of rehabilitation, which is ultimately saying none of this is really your fault. You just had bad luck, bad circumstance, and so we're going to try to correct this in the meantime by giving you pills, putting you in jail. But once we make society equal, none of this is really going to be necessary, since nobody would ever just do something bad except white men. It's only when they're put into tough circumstances that they do bad things. Yeah, okay, well, it's not how that works, but it doesn't even consider that some people might be just like that. Some people might just be impossible to rehabilitate. But if you want to know why our country is so mentally unwell and so incapable of actually delivering justice, it's because both of those institutions are governed by those orthodoxies, which are ultimately just ideological and delusional. And the reason I know this is true is because you look at the evolution of this story, Halloween. Look at what happens in the 2007 remake, the Rob Zombie version. It's the completely opposite depiction. It's the same story, same general happenings, but it totally cucks. It shows young Michael Myers getting bullied at school. His household is abusive. His family's poor. My nurture, my socioeconomic factors, my generational trauma. It's like, it's a way of telling the same story, but it's trying to make us sympathize with Michael Myers by beginning the story showcasing him not as a killer, but really as a victim of circumstance. Give me a break. And again, I'm not unsympathetic to horrible circumstances. I acknowledge fully that people can be dealt horrible hands throughout their lives, even from birth. But our society is based on acknowledging and sort of agreeing that despite that, we're still going to be civilized. That's literally what defines civilization. And that's really the critical mass, I think, for your maturation. Like, when you realize that nothing is fair about life, nothing is just, and you can either spend your entire life resenting that, or you can try to just make the best of it. Like, being a man means that nothing is your fault, but everything is your responsibility. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you don't try to seek justice and make things fair when they are so obviously not fair. But what tends to happen is people want to just use their circumstances as an excuse to treat other people unfairly and to do the wrong thing, and that's just not acceptable. And that's the problem with depictions like these, is that they're clearly intended to make us sympathize with criminals. And when you have a media ecosystem that's saying, wow, you know, criminals are just like you and me, except, well, they've had a hard life. And then you've got a political ecosystem that is defining criminal justice reform as going softer on these people. What that equals is more innocent lives being taken because these insane ideological commitments are just festering throughout our institutions. And so that really does highlight the contrast between the two films being, you know, the 1978 version, the 2007 version. That's really the true dichotomy which John Carpenter seemed to be trying to articulate in terms of evil, which is whether we are made to be inclined to excuse or sympathize with evil behavior or otherwise be inclined to question our moral values. And the original doesn't do this, but the 2007 version does do this. And there was a guy I found on YouTube who was talking about this. He managed to get it exactly backwards. I have to play it for you because it was so wrong. It actually like needs to be studied. Just take a look.
The way I'm going to use this idea is to look primarily at the horror villain and to try and determine whether they come from an outside force or whether they're from within a community. Let's start with Carpenter's slasher Bible, Halloween. Who is the bad guy? Does evil come from within society or are they other? The way I see it, the opening scene answers this question pretty well. The film opens with a POV murder, a shot that says almost literally that the evil on screen is coming from within. We see the suburban setting and that the person committing the crime is native to suburbia.
Well, I
so the
feel like
evil
it's
comes
them
from
not
within that
understanding
community. Michael
conservatism.
Myers is from the neighborhood in which he kills. The suburbs of Haddonfield, even the Myers home itself, are practically indistinguishable from any other suburb in North America. It could happen anywhere. It could happen in your own community. That's why Halloween is so special. Ding ding, Halloween 1978 is left-wing horror.
Okay, so this is the same problem. It's like, yeah, I get what you're saying, I get the point you're making, but the model is just incorrect. Like, maybe at the time it was subversive and left-wing to depict suburbia and human nature this way, but taken into the broader cultural context, how this film treats evil, it just doesn't hold weight, especially then when you look at the 2007 version, which really makes everything fall apart. And of course, this is where his argument disintegrates. Take a look.
By contrast, Rob Zombie's 2007 remake of Halloween depicts Michael Myers, his family, his home, as outsiders to the Haddonfield community. The film is a cruel, blunt instrument set out to undo anything that was frightening about the original. Rob Zombie has a way of pointing his camera at his subjects in an almost hateful way. It feels like he's pointing at someone and saying, ew, look how gross and up this person is. The Myers home in 2007's Halloween couldn't exist anywhere. It's the perfect blend of abuse, neglect, and poverty that destines Michael to be a cold-hearted killer. It couldn't be anyone. It couldn't happen anywhere. It happens because everyone around Michael is cruel to him. The Myers family does not belong in this community. They are clearly outliers. And thus, I'd argue
that
Rob
one
Zombie's
sounds
Halloween is
definitely
patently
more,
right-wing. Not to mention the weird anti-sex worker stuff in this movie.
left-wing.
They undercut Michael's first murder with his mother pole dancing at work, as if to say, see what you did? Your kid is a murderer because you're a sex worker.
When the tides of war seemed insurmountable, when all hope appeared lost, extraordinary leaders emerged to defy the odds. The Savior Generals.
If that ain't some right-wing bullshit, I don't know what is.
Okay, do you see what I mean, though? It's not right-wing because, oh, the Myers family is the other. Oh, they weren't accepted in their community. Yeah, like, probably for a good reason. Have you seen the way these people are behaving? They're, like, pretty much the worst. And it's not Michael's fault, but it's like he's experimenting with killing animals. I'm not really concerned about whose fault that is, per se. Just stay away from my family at that point. But that only works if you subscribe to the model being whether evil is coming from within or from the other, which I don't because it's wrong. And this is the problem with these people as a whole, like why they love things like sources and experts so much. They cannot independently think through things. And so they need some information, some framework to be their like authoritative frame of reference. And that will then guide them to conclusions, which are typically absurd, but that would never occur to them because they arrived at them from using the expert framework. But again, this guy is incapable of understanding that because he can't see the world through that lens. He has to view it through the lens of class, discrimination, people being mean. Did you just shame a sex worker, my dude? Yikes. Try being a decent freaking human being. And you can tell because of the way he unnaturally tries to use the word ain't, and it just sounds forced. Like they always try to mimic the behavior and language of the lower classes to create some sort of sense of solidarity. It's just very weak behavior. But the bottom line is whether we are going to make excuses for individual behavior or if we are going to hold people accountable for the choices they make regardless of circumstance, if we're going to be confident enough in ourselves to make those moral indictments and honestly assess whether some people are simply beyond rehabilitation, that's why Halloween 1978 is implicitly right-wing. Moving on. Number 2, Coraline. Probably seen this one. Very fascinating. Great soundtrack. Great animation style. It's based on a novel.
About the mother.
And essentially, the plot is that this girl moves into a new house with her parents. They don't pay enough attention to her. So she starts exploring. She discovers this new world that seems to be a mirror of her world, except everything is fun and perfect, and her parents spend a lot of time with her, etc. But eventually, she learns that things actually aren't as good as they seem, and her new mom is trying to get her to give up her eyes to stay with her there forever. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Is Coraline actually an anti-trans allegory? 1 second, baby birds, I will feed you. You know, I actually thought about including Sleepaway Camp because the big scary plot twist at the end of that movie is just that the girl who's killing everybody is actually a boy. And back then, people saw that and were like, wow, Or maybe even Silence of the Lambs, Buffalo Bill, homicidal transvestite who wants to wear women's skin, which of course literally never happens because there is no overlap between serial murder and LGBT identification. In general, I think it's overlooked how significantly the widespread commercialization of the true crime, serial killer genre, that whole thing, has contributed to the erosion of trust levels in society, which isn't to say it's the largest factor, but it's still interesting, especially because when you examine these types of stories under microscopes with the strength to extract the details necessary to satiate the detail-hungry masses, it almost always reveals patterns of deep sexual perversions being demonstrated by the killers. Like these same guys, Dahmer, Gacy, etc., these same guys who get off to doing stuff with dead bodies, using body parts to pleasure themselves, getting off to the act of killing in general. These guys also got off to doing things that we're told now are perfectly normal and natural, and if you notice any patterns, you are ontologically evil. No, hey, I'm not Michael Myers. I'm just a sensitive young man, okay? Excuse my behavior. I mean no harm. I'm just saying. I get to just say. I reserve that right. But you can't ignore it's all basically just a sliding scale of sexual depravity. I mean, there's a reason that all lasting societies have placed very strict standards on sexual conduct. Okay, it's a dangerous Pandora's box to open, or to be open-minded about, so to speak. But also, Hannibal Lecter, he's got a pretty good line, too, in the novel. I don't think he says it in the movie, but basically, Clarice Starling is trying to get him to fill out this questionnaire so she can evaluate him psychologically and try to establish a profile for future use. And he says something like, "Oh, Clarice, do you think you can dissect me with this little tool?" And she's like, "No, but it might provide some insight into what happened to you and to what made you like this." And he's like, "Nothing happened to me, Clarice. I happened. You can't reduce me to a set of influences. You've given up good and evil and exchanged them for behaviorism. You've got everybody in moral dignity pants. Nothing ever anybody's fault. Look at me. Can you bring yourself to call me evil?" And that's pretty base. It's kind of like in Halloween. And obviously, it's not that black and white in reality, but it's a lot closer to this than what we're supposed to believe now and what we're being conditioned by virtually every institution in society to believe about good, evil, individual behavior, etc. But anyways, Coraline, this was inspired by a couple posts I put up on my Instagram story a while ago, where I posted a photograph of a teenage girl showing the results of what's referred to as top surgery, which is when girls who self-identify as transgender will have their breasts removed surgically, and it leaves a scar across their chest. Their nipples are gone, and you can look up what that looks like if you would like to. But I posted this photograph, and I said something like, "Remember, these are the people who call you a radical extremist for holding beliefs that would have been completely uncontroversial 50 years ago, even just a decade ago in many cases." It's like, wow. I'm so lucky I wasn't brainwashed into becoming a Nazi after I watched a Ben Shapiro video when I was 14. But then you look at what TikTok brainwashes them into instead, and, it is what it is. And then I posted this where I said, "Reminds me of another tale of adults grooming children. Is Coraline implicitly right-wing?" And so here we are. So if you haven't seen it, like we said, it's the archetypal fairy tale story. But really what made me start looking into it was that imagery, was the visual of the doll with the stitches and the scarring. And then it just clicked. And then I could not unsee it. First, the blue hair. It is inviting this analysis. You've got this impressionable young girl with blue hair. Her parents don't have blue hair. There's no blue hair gene. She dyed it. She's bored. She's upset with her life. She moved away from her friends. Her parents don't pay attention to her. She's depressed. Then this creature takes advantage of that vulnerability. Hey, this is what your life is supposed to be like. Look at this caricature of your identity. Look at how everything could be better for you. You get everything that you deserve out of life. People treat you the way you deserve to be treated. The old white people, your parents, everybody will affirm your existence instead of just ignoring it. Okay, sounds great. How do we make this happen? Well, you got to give me your eyes. I have to perform this surgery on you that's going to leave you horribly disfigured. That's right. That's the fairy tale bargain. You give me a part of yourself, in this case her eyes, irreversibly, and you will be happy. Everything will be better for you. Eyes, of course, being a representation of the ability to align yourself with reality, to see, to perceive reality, to not be blinded, to be taken advantage of. And everybody around her is hinting to her, you probably shouldn't be getting into that world, but they just don't understand. So she does it anyways, because the other mother figure is literally grooming her. And of course, it's an overbearing mother, right? Of course, she has no children of her own, so she has to corrupt others' children. And what happens when the victims of the other mother's grooming try to speak out? They're silenced. They're censored. What about Coraline's real parents? Certainly they wouldn't want this to be happening, right? Yeah, that's why the other mother blocks them from doing anything about it. Oh, you're going to try to stop me from grooming your child? No, actually, I think you have to go to jail. like in a snow globe, but it's the overbearing mother. It's the weak father who's literally puppeteered by her, even though he knows it's wrong and he tries to leave hints to help Coraline, sure, but he ultimately never stands up to the other mother himself because this literal witch, this occultic entity, wants to feed off the souls of the innocent and vulnerable to validate its own existence. And so it preys upon children in distress and it tells them, I know what will make you happy. Your parents don't understand. They don't listen to you. You should listen to me. You should sell me your soul because I'm promising you happiness. Very interesting. Sounds like the moral of that story is that parents need to watch their kids, especially nowadays with social media. You think they're safe because they're under your roof, but you never know what they're getting involved with. All right, moving on. Number 3, Squid Game. I already know what you're going to say. Well, actually, Squid Game's not a movie. Yeah, well, this isn't your list, so don't cry about it. I don't know. When Squid Game was popular, I forgot to talk about it, so I have to do it now. I have to. The real horror is the idea that someone somewhere would not get to hear my opinion on literally any topic at any point. So, yeah. So this is another one of those things where people think it's left-wing because it's critiquing capitalism, which is largely to say it's critiquing usury, and it's like, yeah, same. You know, I remember at the time, people on the right were freaking out about this. They were calling it communist propaganda, anti-capitalist propaganda.
No, it didn't seem that way.
We really just have to stop viewing these things through such immature lenses. These very like sophomoric dichotomies where everything is either communism or capitalism, individualism versus collectivism, etc. Like, we wonder why we can't make culture on our sides, because most of us are just illiterate. The reason this show is ultimately right-wing is because what it portrays is natural and honest about human dynamics, particularly between men and women during these high-stakes, life-threatening situations. Like, there are no girl boss characters. No, like, the only way women survive is by being deceptive and cunning, seducing men, things like that, whereas men tend to advance through just brute strength, ability. So that's really what I'm concerned about. Like, is this piece of media lying to me about human nature? Are you trying to make normal things that are so obviously not normal? And you had everyone at the time, everyone on the right was so mad about this show, and then you had some Cato Institute types who were like, well, actually, it's right-wing because that wasn't real capitalism. That was corporatism, blah, blah, blah. I don't care if it was about capitalism. It can be about capitalism. Economic systems are not what is going to compel me in a story where the stakes are this high. That doesn't make it left-wing. I don't care. I'm like Patrick Starr, you know. All the conservatives hated this show. Yes. All the liberals loved this show. Yes. So that would seem to make the show left-wing. It makes sense to me. So Squid Game is left-wing. No, it's right-wing, you stupid idiot. Like, modern society being unable to provide for the average person is not as a result of a decades-long incumbent political consensus which reflects my beliefs. Capitalism forces people to risk their lives to pay off unfair debts. Okay, maybe, sure. But also, honestly, are you telling me that people wouldn't just sign up for this voluntarily? Let's say there's no debt, no exploitation. It's just open to the public, compete to the death for money. People would sign up for that because, yeah, people are greedy. They like money. But there is a component of vitality to it as well. They're like gladiators. It's a warrior experience. And modern society, if you want to talk about it, provides very few opportunities for men to channel that impulse anymore. Why do you think the last 20 years of media has been things like, oh, The Walking Dead, Lost, Breaking Bad, the whole post-apocalyptic genre? All of that media is about men becoming who they are. So I'm not saying it's moral to hypothetically construct this competition where people can fight to the death for money, but what I am saying is that we have to stop automatically assigning people victim status when they are perfectly happy to do something, which is different, by the way, from when something's obviously making them miserable and they just pretend otherwise. But I see this a lot from people on the right where they're like, oh, these poor soldiers, they're victims. Wow, stop the violence. It's all so sad. What are you talking about? Have you ever spoken to a man before? Constantly fantasizing about taking down muggers, burglars, blue helmets, whatever. After Vietnam, we found this out, that a large reason that combat veterans have trouble readjusting to society after they return isn't because they're just so traumatized. Of course, war changes you, but it's because once you experience the feeling of going to war with other men, that's tough to walk away from. That's tough to adjust from. And obviously, I don't have experience with this because our military doesn't fight wars for Americans anymore. But if we did something like, I don't know, militarize the southern border, I would sign up overnight. And you can hold me to that. My point is just that if somebody thinks they've been victimized or they give the appearance of that, that's one thing. But I see a lot of people trying to assign victim status to soldiers automatically. And it seems to be from the usual suspects who would do it just because they're afraid of male behavior and what that's capable of. But anyways, yeah, the director says, oh, it's a fable about modern capitalist society. Who cares? People degrading themselves for money? Sure. But if I made a version about how modern capitalist society forces people to degrade themselves for money by becoming sex workers, well, all of a sudden that wouldn't be so left-wing now, would it? Also, it spends a not insignificant amount of time focusing on these elite sex parties and rituals. The left never really likes to talk about things like that. They like to ignore it or dismiss it. And I honestly think it's because they're like offended by the idea of sexual abuse not being democratized. Like, why do only the elites get to do this? Why only the 1%? No fair. Like, seriously, obviously, judging by their conduct, they're not offended by abuse or grooming. So clearly they're just like resentful because they're excluded from it. Resentment, of course, being at the core of all leftism. So, all right, moving on. Number 4, the remake of The Last House on the Left. Very importantly, the remake. This might be my favorite one on the list, so we're going to spend a lot of time on this one because similarly to Halloween and the evolution of that story between the original and the remake, this story perverts itself and then is redeemed. Allow me to explain. So, the original Last House on the Left in 1972 was written and directed by the legendary Wes Craven before he did other movies like A Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream. And the basic plot is a girl goes out with her friend, they get into a bad situation, they're brutally violated and killed by these people, and then these people end up going to her parents' house just by happenstance, and the parents piece everything together, and then they get their revenge on the people who killed and violated their daughter. Now, this is actually a good example of a horror film that was legitimately subversive and honestly well done because you've got themes that are right-wing, you've got the father as the head of the household, he's the patriarch, he's defending his daughter's honor and her chastity by essentially becoming a vigilante, and it has the family as the source of safety and security against the other who seek to corrupt their daughter and harm her. And in contrast to the 1972 version where it's like, okay, yeah, you violated and killed my daughter, you deserve the worst, the fact that what happens in the 2009 version to the killers is even more brutal and the daughter wasn't even killed proves that it's not just like revenge in the broadest sense of the term because something bad happened, but revenge for something terrible happening that harmed the honor of the family, that breached its security, that the father views as transgressive to his authority and insulting to him by harming his family. Now, what's interesting, and this is why ultimately the 1972 version is subversive and the 2009 version is our movie, because the stories and the way that they conclude and how they portray the characters throughout them are different. So to give you the full picture and the full context, we're going to have to wind the clocks back. But basically, what happens is that at the end of the 1972 version, the audience is made to feel that the parents were unjustified in their actions and that they're actually just as bad as the people who brutalized and killed their daughter. Whereas at the end of the 2009 version, it basically like glorifies the parents doing what they did. And so that's sort of tying back to the revision that we did earlier on John Carpenter's model, where we said what ultimately defines it is something to the effect of whether we are made to sympathize with the villains and or question our moral convictions. And the family is, of course, central to this story as a whole and also to the entire genre as a whole and to Wes Craven as a filmmaker. Because like we said earlier, older horror movies were more focused on a creature or like a ghost, things of that nature. But since around the 1960s, horror movies have been dominated by a handful of motifs, being the monster or evil as like a psychopath or a schizophrenic, like in Psycho, or slasher movies, things like that, or the revenge of nature, things like The Birds, Day of the Animals, The Happening, remember that one?
Bro,
also
how many
Satanism, demonic possession, The Antichrist,
scary
like in
movies
Rosemary's
is
Baby,
watched?
The Exorcist, The Omen. You know, we don't really have ghost movies anymore. We have demon movies, and there is some significance to that, I think. The Child from Hell, right, which is often connected to the satanic motif, things like The Omen, again, Carrie. Then you've got cannibalism, like in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Hills Have Eyes, Night of the Living Dead, etc. And all these motifs, even though they seem somewhat separate, they can all actually be unified and drawn together by one unifying force, which is the family unit. And in the case where the connection to the family unit is the most tenuous, probably the revenge of nature, that motif as a whole, that ended up being the least successful and productive in comparison to the other motifs. And in the more successful examples of it, namely The Birds and Squirm, the attacks still seem to be linked to or drawn out by sexual or familial tensions. So in the other ones, the connection between the family unit has been much more consistent. The psychotic, the schizophrenic, the antichrist, the child monster, you know, all these things are shown as a part of the family, whether the family is guilty or innocent, like in The Omen. So older horror films were much more focused on monsters. We had a tour of service, perhaps, with science fiction invaders, where the heroes were always American, perhaps a metaphor for foreign or communist infiltration. Good thing that didn't end up happening. But since the 60s and 70s, horror movies have followed the trend of subverting the family unit, questioning its goodness, its utility, its naturality, etc. But in some cases, like the 2009 version of Last House on the Left, it ultimately is good because we see the family unify and triumph over the other. So it does depend on the movie in itself. And popular media is often a good measure for people's anxieties. So perhaps the success of the horror genre can in part be attributed to that it reflected the anxieties people felt about the collapse of the family structure during the same time period. And Wes Craven himself, like we said, has been pivotal in this because the majority of his films, in some way or another, focus on the collapse of the family in modern America. In The Last House on the Left, it's the generation gap, the child abuse scene in the Krug family who ends up attacking and killing the main family's daughter. It's the overbearing parental figures in The Hills Have Eyes, alcoholism, murder, a negligent father in A Nightmare on Elm Street. You've got unfaithful family members in Scream, in A Stranger in Our House, incest in People Under the Stairs, et cetera, et cetera. And so the causes may be diverse, but the overall disintegration is constant. So in The Last House on the Left, we're not only questioning the family unit and the actions taken by the parents after what happened to their daughter, but it's also, of course, doing a lot to make the audience try to sympathize with the attackers in themselves and even dislike the parents in some cases. Like when they arrive at the family's house, there are elements of class conflict. They're obviously lower class. They don't have manners, etc. But before we continue, to really understand the whole story, we do have to go back to a movie from 1958 called The Virgin Spring, which Last House on the Left was written to serve as a sort of reinterpretation of by Wes Craven. So The Virgin Spring is a Swedish movie which debuted in America in 1960, ended up winning an Academy Award for Best Foreign Film. And the screenwriter for this movie took inspiration from a story from medieval Germany originating sometime around the 12th and 14th centuries called Tor's Daughter, which despite them having discovered something like 24 variations of the story, it does follow the same general plot, which is that there are some daughters, they're on their way to church, they get brutalized by a group of men, these men end up stumbling across the father, and the father puts two and two together and then enacts revenge against the perpetrators. Now, The Virgin Spring tells this story pretty well, and Craven's adaptation is much more modern, we'll say, because in The Virgin Spring, the girl's on her way to light candles for the Virgin Mary, and in The Last House on the Left, she's on her way to a rock concert. And so the reason it's called The Virgin Spring is because in the aftermath, her father's devastated. I mean, he's questioning God's existence, how God could let such brutality occur in a world that he creates and that he controls. And he goes to build a church where his daughter was killed. And then by miracle, a spring surfaces, this beautiful freshwater spring. And we end on this high shot showcasing the spring and the surrounding brutality and the people praying. And it answers the film's prior questioning of Christ by showing that he does ultimately watch over man, even if he doesn't always stop the evil that occurs in the world which surrounds us. Now, we contrast this with the modern ending in The Last House on the Left in 1972. And the parents are just in their living room. It's quiet. There's no moment of enlightenment or truth. They're just in shock, seemingly like horrified at their own actions. In the credits roll, we hear a song titled The Road Leads to Nowhere. And the lyrics are exactly that. The road leads to nowhere. There's no point. It's existential. It's nihilistic. The only destination is death. There's no God. Nothing follows. Only death. There's no redemption. There's no higher shot implying that God is watching, because in this movie, God's dead. The parents haven't even achieved redemption because now they're even questioning their own actions. They're also going to prison forever now, by the way, because the police show up too. And if there's no God, then the daughter basically ceases to be a concept the moment she dies. She can never truly have redemption, so to speak. The redemption would be from the parents feeling as though what happened to their daughter was a transgression against them, which it was. But if now they don't even stand by their own actions or feel as though they acted justly, well, then what? Nothing. All those ideas of honor and patriarchy and redemption, chastity, it was all obviously for nothing, right? Of course. Everything's relative. There's no God. There's no morality. It's all undefined. And this perfectly reflects the growing atheist sentiments of the 1970s, with many asking, even the cover of Time magazine in 1966, is God dead? You know, we watch what happens to these women as the audience, and we're craving justice, but when supposedly it's delivered, the aftermath is quiet. It's like shameful. It's unsettling. It's not a celebration. We just like feel ashamed. You know, there's not some moment of enlightenment, nothing implying a higher order. It's just darkness, just quiet, nothingness. Everything means nothing. It's all just molecules moving around, man. Like, what has even been gained? Nothing. The daughter's still dead. They don't feel any better. They feel ashamed. They're shocked at their own actions. They're still on the road to nowhere. As the soundtrack says, the castle stays the same. The house is still empty, but it's just bloodier now, right? And by showcasing that as the finale of the movie, depicting the bloodshed and retribution is just nothing more than futility. It was all for nothing. Whereas the ending of The Virgin Spring, it's uplifting. It's vindicating. We have the image of the parents in this like shocked, agonizing state. It's shoved down our throats for what feels like an hour. It's like 2 minutes. There's no triumphant music, no overture, which we would hear is, oh, justice. It's just the image of people in pain. And so by ending in this way, by freezing on these tortured faces, the movie's actually portraying an argument against violence and against revenge, despite what the critics at the time thought, which is that it was trying to glorify and encourage it. Whereas the movie even goes as far as to make clear that it's not so much what has happened to the daughter that has traumatized the family. Again, it's absolutely horrific what those people do to her. You can go check it out for yourself. But it's not so much that, but the realization by the family of like, wow, I guess I'm no better than the people who did. And that's the contrast. The final image in this movie is not of beautiful, fresh spring water, indicating God's existence, the ultimate plan, putting aside the violence that we've just witnessed in focus of that existence and of that plan. Rather, we're staying on these two broken, shattered human beings, and there's no plan. Everything leads to death, and death leads to nowhere. The road leads to nowhere. And again, these people also broke the heckin' law, and the cops are there, so they're going to prison now. There's nothing that's been achieved. There's no validation. Whereas the Virgin Spring showcases forgiveness and blessings, despite horrible acts of violence for those who serve God and ask for his forgiveness. And maybe there's even something to be said about literally washing the blood off your hands after having built a church in God's name. And the reason people think that's a dangerous message is because we live in a world right now where there's all sorts of evil that might compel people to act violently in service of God, such as going after abortion clinics. And obviously we disavow that. We're not talking about breaking any laws here, but this is the eternal libtard motif, which is spread into every facet of our civilization like a cancer. This idea of believing in something might cause you to defend it with violence. And so it's actually better to just believe in nothing and just be a cynic and a hedonist for your entire life. So we can see how the film from which this was inspired was actually subverted. It was revolutionized to meet modern standards. And there are a lot of other subtle film techniques in the 1972 version that present this same argument to the audience about how violence is never justified, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't want to spend too much time on this one. But it's also subversive in the sense that at the time it was considered to be the goriest movie ever produced up until I think Texas Chainsaw a couple years later, which is another libtard movie that's trying to say apparently like, oh, well, you know, eating animals is actually just as bad as eating people. It's like, okay. But this movie is anti-violence. The title too being The Last House on the Left, implying, well, this could happen to anybody. Anybody's capable of this. It's all about what environmental factors you're subjected to. Everything is so freaking complicated. But it also, you know, like if it celebrates it though, the violence is retribution for what they did to the daughter. Well, then it's actually like based in red pill. It's like anybody's capable of this. Become who you are, patriarch. Have justice. But there's some other things going on that contribute to the context of the film's release. Like you had the increasingly popular superhero genre, the 70s crime wave, violent crime increasing like 126% between 1960 and 1970, and then another 64% between 1970 and 1980. So perhaps there's like a critique of vigilantism in this movie, which is cringe. There's probably something too about the Vietnam War with the anti-violence, moral relativism, stuff like that. And there are a lot of more subtle things too throughout this movie that are subversive. Like there are a lot of other examples of trying to directly expose or highlight the hypocrisy of characters, particularly the parents and their moral standards, their moral traditions, things like that. Oh, well, the friend who the parent said is a negative influence is actually a freaking good person who tries to save the daughter. Oh, well, the mom says that not wearing a bra is bad because it brings bad attention, but actually mom equals bad because she's wearing a bra that actually highlights her boobs. Wow, everything is so freaking complicated. There's also strong anti-cop sentiment too. Police are totally incompetent. There's anti-justice system sentiment because the killers are able to escape from prison, and which is also hilarious because it's simultaneously telling the audience law enforcement is incompetent, the justice system is incompetent, but also don't freaking take things into your own hands. It's like the epitome of the sort of cynicism and nihilism that was infecting the country right around the same time. There's not a single character in this movie who is not involved in some moment or subplot that is supposed to expose the hypocrisy or incompetence of institutions or moral frameworks that are important for our society to function as it should. It wants to subvert them. Whereas the 2009 version has a much more clear us versus them, bad guys are evil, good guys are good, and it becomes much more clear every year that in a corrupt and fallen world, we have to be willing to use force to defend our own, to defend our families. And so the ending of this version is triumphant. It's very cinematic, slow motion. Everybody gets on the boat. They literally ride off into the sunset together as a family. Nice. And then the treat for the audience for sticking around is the sequence where he just kills a guy. There's no moment of reflection. No like, oh my gosh, what did we do? Just tying up loose ends. Audience walks away. Everyone's happy. Splendid. The bad guy's lost. Even the taglines are different. The 1972 version famously said, to avoid fainting, keep repeating, it's only a movie. It's only a movie, which is like, yeah, we're going to show you a bunch of violence. And then you're going to walk away like, oh my gosh, that was all so equal and bad. And in 2009, it's like, if bad people hurt the ones you love, how far would you be willing to go to hurt them back? So true. No further analysis needed. No nuance. Bad news. Bad guys hurt one of the good guys. We got some work to do. Are you sure we're not taking this too far? Shut up, hippie. The root of the story, it goes all the way back, all the different versions. It's ultimately an attack of the daughter and her honor, her purity, the father's willingness to seek vengeance for this because he views those attacks to be by extension against him. The 2009 version acknowledges this with a line where the guy talks about how tight the daughter was when he's taunting the dad before the dad ends up taking him down, and it's vulgar and it's horrible, but there's a reason he said it. And it's no surprise to me that an ideology which is skeptical of the importance of family structure, purity, honor, etc., views all these things as socially constructed, as archaic. It's no surprise to me that that person would conclude that violence in service of redeeming those things is ultimately bad, and at that, just as bad as the violence against those things in the first place. Also, the 1972 version is much more rebellious, rock and roll, free love than the 2009 version. The 2009 one basically just has the girls like, okay, I'll go do some gay weed. I'll go do some gay weed like a gay person. So it's not like in either version the girls are perfect angels going to light candles for the Virgin Mary, but the 2009 version is certainly a lot closer to that than the 1972 version. And it also brings back those clear dividing lines, which the 1972 version had made such an effort to blur. In the remake, there are very clear dividing lines between good and evil, whereas Craven made a serious effort to show the humanity of the bad guys and the ease with which the good guys could slip into this violent, manic vengeance and be no better than the bad guys. And he even said as much about the movie, I think, that he wanted to just throw the whole moral compass out the window, which he does do. I mean, he deconstructs that objective morality that exists in the Virgin Spring, but then we run it back in the 2009 version, so it's all okay. Good old family values. That's what that movie is about. The 2009 version, it's about the family seeking vengeance. It's driven out of a desire to protect the family, which is the opposite of Craven's legacy, as we mentioned, which is basically subverting the family. And for what it's worth, this was common throughout Hollywood in general during this time period. I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that Wes Craven is responsible for the collapse of the American family, but the horror genre in particular did. Like we said, it turned the family into a source of horror and evil in many cases, whereas the 2009 redeemed cut does the opposite because it restores the family to being the source of safety and protection and survival and being good as an institution, like that protects against external threats. So I'm not saying the 2009 remake was better exactly than the 1972 version, just that it agrees with my worldview, which counts for something. I appreciate it. I appreciate that the 2009 version upholds what we naturally want to see, returns to the tradition of the original story that the 1972 libtard version tried to subvert. It's like we said in the Beauty and the Beast video. Our perspective of the characters is manipulated and informed by how much time we spend with them, what we see them doing, etc. In the 1972 version, as a mother and father just out of breath in this bloody room and they're shocked with themselves, their faces saying, what have I done? That's literally how it ends. A freeze frame on the dad looking horrified with himself. Plus the police show up. All these people are going to prison forever. Oh my gosh, when I found out that these guys raped and murdered my daughter, I should have just filed a police report and trusted the judicial process like a good citizen. Now look at me. Oh man, I guess morality is so freaking complicated. I should just trust our civic institutions to deliver justice. Okay, cuck. Yeah, I hope you get violated. Have fun in prison. But in the 2009 version, dad just puts the guy's head in the microwave, just walks away like Billy Badass. Head explodes. Boom, credits. No police. Just some shots of the household. The fortress. His fortress. The head of the household. The patriarch protecting his daughter, no police, no gay philosophizing. Just it's the climax. That's the conclusion. That's the takeaway. Oh my gosh, I just did to them what they did to my daughter. How am I any better than them? My principles, morality, and people are so freaking complicated and nuanced. Whoa! Versus the Chad, you just hurt my daughter. I did not appreciate that. I think we'll see if I can use an appliance to explode your head. That's like the bottom line. That's the story as a whole. It is linked to patriarchy. It is linked to absolute morality. It is linked to God. The Wes Craven version tried to subvert that. The 2009 version redeems it. It restores order. And by the way, I disavow everything I just said. I am simply a film critic, okay? But a lot of horror movies are serious enough attempts at art to be worth the time that you spend thinking about them. All that said, if you're going to watch a version of it, you should probably watch the 1972 version. It is a classic, okay? I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube for free. So on to our last one, number 5, the original Pet Sematary from 1989. Based, of course, on the 1983 novel by Stephen King. You know, I was trying to think of movies that were classics for this list that I remember liking a lot, and I just sort of thought to myself, oh yeah, Pet Sematary, because playing God is bad. Boom, right wing. Then I rewatched it. Keep in mind, I saw that movie one time, like a decade ago, when I went through my Stephen King phase. All I remember is the general plot, specifically the way the old guy gets killed, and the scene at the end, the guy's playing solitaire on the floor by himself in the kitchen. I was just kind of like, huh, that's interesting. Thought that was only on Grandma's computer. Crazy. But then I rewatched that before this video. That I almost feel irresponsible including on the list. That movie's messed up. I mean, compared to a lot of stuff that's put out nowadays, maybe it's not so bad. It's really not that bad. Certainly not the most demented thing ever, but probably the most demented thing on this list. Basically what happens is you've got this family who moves to a new place because the dad gets a new job as a physician. There's a place behind their property where their new neighbor tells them there's an old pet cemetery where kids used to go to bury their pets when they died. Meanwhile, weird stuff starts happening to the family. A bee sting here, a skin knee there, and this guy gets into an accident. He tells the dad to stay away from the cemetery, and he calls him by his name even though they never met before, and then he dies. Anyways, their family cat ends up dying too, and the dad doesn't want the daughter to be sad, and so the neighbor guy's like, oh, you know, go behind the pet cemetery. There's this Indian burial ground that can bring things back to life if you bury them there. And he tells them that he did that when he was a kid with his dog, but it might be a little bit different when it comes back, but it'll save the daughter from the grief. And so the cat comes back to life, acts all weird and vicious towards the dad. Its eyes are glowing now, whatever. Then the little boy ends up getting hit by a truck on the same road that the cat dies on. He's killed, and the old neighbor guy's like, don't bury your son there. The dad's like, I wasn't gonna. And then the neighbor guy tells him a story when some local guy buried his son there after he died during World War II, and basically he came back as like a zombie, terrorized the whole town. Everyone got together to try to kill the guy by burning it to death, and then the dad was also burned alive in the process by accident, and he tells him that he probably awakened some malevolent force by going there to bury the cat, which is probably why the son was killed, and he should just leave it alone, because sometimes dead is better. The dad essentially doesn't listen, buries the son there, son comes back to life, kills the neighbor guy, kills the wife who's the son's mom, tries to kill the dad, and then the dad has to kill his own son. That part's disturbing. Not because of the nature of it by itself, but the way they do it. It'd be one thing if the dad was like, you know, ciao, one and done. This is one thing I won't spoil. You gotta go see it. He basically like tricks the son and makes him pass out, and the way the son reacts is just very unsettling. Just go watch it. But he does that, burns the old guy's house down, which is where this all happened, and then immediately he takes his wife's body back to the Forbidden Sandbox, and the ghost guy from the earlier accident, he's like, no, don't do it. And he's like, trust. Because I guess he thought it would work this time since less time had passed since she died, whereas the son, it had been a couple days or whatever. And of course, it does not work. She comes back like a disgusting zombie right at midnight, and then he starts making out with the dead wife. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen. This is how some of you MFers be, though. Bro, I can save her. Bro, she's different. She's totally switching up and deserving the consequences. So yeah, she of course immediately picks up a knife and kills him, and then the movie ends. Very interesting behavior. So as I'm sure you've gathered, this movie is about grief and ultimately trying to, in desperation, conquer nature and play God. Does that make us sympathetic to the poor choices of the dad? Sure, but ultimately we see that there are bad consequences for these poor choices, so I don't think it's subversive because it just affirms what we know is true and real. And it really is a theological story too. It's trying to mimic and pervert the resurrection of Christ, but because only Christ can resurrect from the dead, only he has that power, what results instead is abominable and sinister. Like you choose to utilize this occult version of that in a moment of weakness, and then you realize, after all, it's not the same thing entirely. I mean, the devil and his servants, of course, are going to promise you one thing, and then when you invite that into your life, you learn that it's just going to torment you. And that whole sequence really is a ritual. I mean, you're giving the body of the deceased to be absorbed by this Indian demon, and in return, of course, it just punishes you, obviously, which I do kind of appreciate, actually. Like, participates in indigenous culture literally one time, immediately the worst thing ever happens. So true, Stephen King. This continent is so plagued still by the remnants of pagan ritual human sacrifice. That's why the gnomes don't reveal themselves to us. But some people say it's about faith versus reason, because the doctor isn't religious. He's got these conversations with his daughter where he's much more reason-based, so to speak, when she's asking about the afterlife and God after her cat dies. And then it's supposed to kind of contradict this in this moment of desperation because he has faith that burying his child will bring him back, but that's not really faith. Like, it brought the cat back, so he knows it's at least conceivable. But I wouldn't use that word because you're just trying to play God. So it's like you have faith, but in what exactly? Like, what powers are you entrusting? And why do you think that's a good idea? You're participating in the occult, and faith in God would say, definitely do not do that. But reason, as a moral, would say, well, if it's possible, why can't I do that? I want my child to be alive. He currently cannot consent to being re-alived, but I can reasonably infer that he would give informed consent if he could. Therefore, this procedure is ethical and good, actually, so I will proceed. Ha, ha, stupid idiot. You made out with a zombie and then you died. And we all saw it. It's literally like over. This is your average reason enjoyer, by the way. Literally, I've seen it. These are the kinds of women that the John Doyle ankle biters are interacting with, by the way. But yeah, there's a lot of dialogue in this movie questioning why God lets people die, why it's his choice and not ours, etc. And even the dad who buried his son, who then came back as a zombie, old neighbor guy says to him, God help you. And he barks something back like, God never helped me. I helped myself. It's like, okay, well, look where that got you. I mean, you helped yourself by putting your faith into demons. You can't do that. You can't play God. You can't try to transcend death. It's always going to backfire. But it does raise some interesting questions about what life really is, what really is death, you know? If you can replicate someone's consciousness, is it really them? How can you tell? What if you can't tell? Does it even matter? Who knows? These are man-made horrors beyond my comprehension. But we see a lot of this in our culture now, with AI, all these medications and surgeries and transplants, makeup, editing, abortion, all this stuff to delay death, to conquer it, to conquer life, to conquer nature. And it's all just very wrong to me. I mean, these people who've had like 100 organ transplants just refusing to die, like, and I completely understand, by the way, that if and when this happens to me or someone I love, I will probably feel very differently, but that's always how these things go, right? Like in a clear mind, it seems bizarre and wrong, but in a moment of desperation, who knows? You know, that's why this story is a reminder that as a man, as the head of the household, you need to be a leader. You have to be strong, and you have to have a strong faith in God, because if you don't, who knows what you'll be tempted to put your faith into as an alternative. You have to focus on your family, you need to be realistic, not think impulsively, not think with emotion, not try to conquer death or life or delay the inevitable, not debase yourself, not dishonor those you love, because look what happens otherwise. This guy couldn't keep it together, and it cost him his wife, cost him his friend, his own life, now his daughter's an orphan. All just very terrible. But hey, that's hey guys, if you like this video, leave it a thumbs up, leave it a comment, subscribe to the channel. You know, yeah, knock knock, trick or treat. Leave the thumbs up, please. Put the thumbs up in the bowl. I trust community. Okay, I'm gonna trust that you're gonna do this. I don't have to monitor. I don't have to sit in the sort of nook by the front door and wait individually as you all come. You have to. I'm trusting. Okay, I'm trusting you to leave the thumbs up. If you don't leave the thumbs up, if you don't go to undertack.com, if you don't subscribe to the channel, we are all literally going to die. Also, leave a comment. What did you think? What other movies did I miss out on that are implicitly right wing? What about explicitly right wing? What about subtly right wing? Is there even a difference between that and the former? Who knows? Let me know in the comments. Turn on post notifications. You probably missed my last 30 videos, which were all posted between the months of August and presently. So turn on notifications. Also, share the video with a friend. I know some of you aren't doing that. I know for a fact. I'm looking at the numbers, and I know that. Thumbs up, comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications. Subscribe. We covered subscribe, sort of, and then share the video with a friend. Okay, happy Halloween. By the way, I am not wearing a.
Well, this said that it was going to be.
Find your beat. Your moment of calm. Find your potential, then own it. Support your immune system with a potent blend of nutrients and emerge your best every day with Emergency.
Thanksgiving is a slasher film set in Plymouth, Massachusetts.
Thanksgiving is an institution here.
They have such a rich history with the Pilgrims.
It's the giant pie of a mask.
First governor of New Plymouth Colony.
I mean, the most that happened in the town before this was a parking ticket, and now there's a killer on the loose.
We're looking for an individual.
You're not going to believe what he's wearing. Everyone in town's wearing them.
It's fun, and it makes you want to find out who is the killer.
The Squirrel made a hate thread about you. A deranged neoliberal streamer who hadn't heard of Palestine until a few days ago decided to do a research stream on it comprised of skimming Wikipedia for a couple hours, and has become the most fanatical, far-right Zionist lunatic alive. Real shocker, couldn't see that coming. This is the same scumbag piece of human filth who was live streaming praise for the fascist Christian fundamentalist military coup in Bolivia, repeating the lie that it was a stolen election and never bothered to correct it. Oh, by the way, credibility is important. I was correct 100% on everything relating to the Bolivia stuff. Remember, all of these guys said that when that lady came into power in the interim government, that Bolivia would never have elections again, that it was a military coup, that the government was not taking over. They did have elections again. And I'm pretty sure the Morales Party, I think, won next, didn't they? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that. But didn't the Morales Party literally win the next set of elections? Somebody can tell me if I'm right or wrong on that. I think they did. They did win again, yes. And guess what? No military stopped them. Nobody. So these guys were it's funny that she brings this up, but they were 1,000,000% wrong on that. That it was a CIA-backed government coup that was going to prevent socialist parties from everything. They were completely wrong about that. But okay. No evidence of fraud in Morales' poll victory. Says U.S. researchers, a bitter election, accusations of fraud, and now second thoughts, breaking exit polls for the Bolivia movement. By the way, the issues weren't that there were evidence of fraud. The issue was that votes have confirmed to have been routed through servers that were controlled, I believe, by the Morales Party that had no third-party auditing. That was the issue that people have. And I'm almost positive that was 100% true. There wasn't evidence of fraud, but it was impossible to verify. That was the issue that people had. So this is also not a very accurate. Also, people's issue, I believe, with Evo is I think it was in Bolivia where he got the Supreme Court to change the term limits for the president as well, right? From 2 terms to 4 or something more. Yeah, but she's leaving out everything. I don't know. Or the score person might not know anything about Bolivia. I have no idea. But yeah, this person.
What the fuck? They're some.
Notice, by the way, that the scumbag piece of garbage Gusano, nice racial slur, suddenly stopped believing in Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and B'Tselem Salem on Israel and Israel alone. On every other country that the U.S. considers an official enemy, they're 100% accurate. When have I ever said I don't believe Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and B'Tselem Salem? Destiny, I literally asked you about Amnesty earlier today, and you just said you don't really know what they do. I remember you asking me about it, but I might have asked, I don't know what they said about Israel. But Amnesty International and UN, HRW, these are usually the orgs that I look for to verify stuff that's going on in the countries, because I don't know if I 100% believe the IDF, and obviously Hamas will say whatever. But I think I appeal to either US Intel or these third-party NGOs or whatever. Would you consider Amnesty International to be NGO, right? I think you said Amnesty's coverage wasn't truthful a few days ago, but not to that level. Why did they publish a dog shit article or something? Apparently they call Israel an apartheid state. Oh, I might have disagreed with that. But also, I think the UN has a panel where they called them an apartheid state too. But also, Amnesty International and the UN, these are really big organizations. The UN and Amnesty International, they probably say things I agree with, and they probably say things I disagree with. But articles that are written on these websites are a lot different than them vetting or verifying, dead people or doing investigations or whatever. I'm pretty sure these are really huge orgs. Amnesty International is a global movement with more than 10 million people in 150 countries who campaign, nice, 2 campaigns, for a world where human rights are enjoyed by all. Why do you think the squirrel person hates you so much? Oh, they're just a super tanky shell, a super anti-American shell, and they hate me because they called me a fascist. I think they used to be a big fan of mine when I was on my debating Nazi arc, and then when I started debating lefties, they lost their fucking mind. New tweets. Ugh. Okay, the last one. And then we got it. Guys, I'm live for 4 hours. Okay, we definitely need to start reading, okay? Too much other shit. Someone just sent me a clip of the streamer responding to the Bolivia post saying that they were correct. God, this person is obsessed with me. Saying they were correct because an election Morales Party won. This is amazing. He doesn't know the fascist coup regime killed countless and was forced into an election by a mass uprising. He also repeated, wait, what were the countless people killed? Countless? Summary executions and widespread repression under Bolivia's interim government, reports rights advocates from Harvard University Network. What are the countless? Why not list the number? How many? General striking blockade in Bolivia under day 11. Espertos has condemned the delayed vote by coup government. Now, Oh, also independent global news, Democracy Now. Nice one. There were protests in Bolivia because the vote was delayed, but I believe their excuse for delaying the vote was because of COVID and that it was hard to do it safely. Now, whether you believe them or not, I mean, they did hold the vote and they did have the new parties and everything come in. But I mean, like, again, the date of this August 13th, 2020. But countless because you can't find any bodies to count. He also repeated that actually there was fraud in the election. I literally said there was. I didn't say there was fraud in the election. I said that the votes went to servers that I believe were controlled by Evo's party that nobody else could audit. That was the issue. I literally said there was no proven fraud. People just thought that some of the voting looked weird or irregular, and they had no access to the servers that some of the votes were routed through. Like, which even the New York Times, Washington Post, and Guardian admit is false. If you watch this hack who just spouts asinine rhetoric without any knowledge of the basic facts, don't you feel embarrassed? Aren't you even a little ashamed? Also, he's never heard of Bet Salem. I guess he didn't come across him as wiki skimming, the main human rights organization in Israel itself, which is regarded as the most credible, including by Western human rights orgs like Amnesty and HRW. It's all a sick, depraved joke. Let's like look for this, I guess. But if she's too retarded or doesn't know the numbers. Summary, executions, and widespread repression, Bolivia's interim government. Also, this is just a thing I've noticed. Always be really hesitant about people that link pictures of stories but don't include links to the actual stories. Anytime you see me tweet out stories or anything, or pictures of stories, I always include like reference to the source so you can go through and read it yourself. It's always like really sketch when somebody won't include links, but Bolivia's recent interim government came to power by suspending constitutional rules, presidential persecuted opponents with systematic torture of summary executions by security forces and the tumultuous aftermath of Evo Morales' resignation in 2019, according to a new report by independent human rights experts. The scathing 471-page report, most comprehensive yet to examine the events surrounding the disputed 2019 election. Where's the number? I want to know the countless numbers of people killed. This is what I was talking about before. The OAS electoral mission to Bolivia found a number of irregularities in the 2019 election, including the existence of hidden computer servers. After 3-day visit to Bolivia, Paulo Abreu, who heads the Inter-American Commission, recommended Bolivia coordinate with an international panel of experts, only one formed to discuss the dismissal of 43 students in Mexico. Oof, was that the cartel killing these people? Normally, these situations, national institutions aren't prepared to resolve such a massive grouping of violations. Bolivia spelled on chaos after 20th. Okay, most of the at least 33 fatalities since the vote occurred after the military deployed against Morales' backers as they blocked strategic roads to protest by the view as a coup. So it's number 33? And the article had 20 deaths listed further down. Oh, did it?
Look at these fat fucks.
Not to say that like any deaths are good, by the way. It's not. But like, why lie? Why say countless deaths? Okay.
Oh,
maybe she can't
shit.
count 33. It's possible.
That was crazy.
Do you want to grow your YouTube channel? You should consider getting TubeBuddy.
I've been using TubeBuddy for the last 2 years and it has improved tremendously.
Increasingly unpopular Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy recently sat down for an interview with Piers Morgan. And though the interview was tough and covered a variety of topics, what was probably the most interesting part for me was when Morgan grilled Vivek about his stance on the Second Amendment and gun control, and you won't believe what he says. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. All right, folks, I've got a relatively long clip to play here, but it's fascinating to me because it comes the closest, I think, to a disturbingly honest perspective on the Second Amendment and its impact on the lives of fellow Americans, okay? And I'll also say that you should watch the interview in its entirety. I know you and I probably disagree with most of Piers Morgan's politics, and rightly so, but he is an excellent interviewer, and there are a wide array of topics that are covered here. And I'll also point out for context
I do like
that this particular
Piers
segment,
Morgan
this
a
particular
little bit
interview
more
comes in the
now,
aftermath
'cause he's
of the
funny
Lewiston, Maine mass shootings, which killed 18 people and injured 13 others. And lastly, I'll point out that the United States has had more than 560 mass shootings so far in 2023. So keep that in mind. Now, without further ado, here is Piers Morgan and Vivek Ramaswamy talking about the situation. They reference Lewiston, Maine directly right before this clip begins. And Piers Morgan's essentially asking him, what's your stance on the Second Amendment and gun control?
Well, I think that makes no sense.
You're a very bright man.
I'm a medical and food choice absolutist.
Can you explain to me why it's deemed more dangerous that I should have a chocolate egg with a little toy inside that might choke people compared to an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle that could...
Well, one's not protected by our Constitution, and the other one is. But also, I think that you should be able to have that toy egg too.
slaughter a lot of people in a very short period of time.
So I'm a pro-freedom person, and so I'm not going to sit here and defend some other foolish restriction that the United States has on a million things that I'm generally against. But I can speak to the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is not about a technocratic judgment about maximizing or minimizing the number of people who were killed. The Second Amendment is about something else altogether. It's analogous to the discussion we just had about free speech. It's a different value judgment. Are there risks to allowing free speech? Yes, there are, but we bear those risks because that's who we are. That we trade that risk off to say that's how we preserve freedom when it comes to the First Amendment. The Second Amendment makes a similar value judgment. The purpose of the Second Amendment actually wasn't to allow people to have the freedom to hunt. That's not what it's about. It was about repelling and keeping a foreign, in that case, British monarchy at bay. It's like mutually assured destruction in the Cold War. Both sides have nuclear weapons. Well, that's how you assure a stable peace. It's a mutually assured destruction relationship between the citizens and their government, between the governed and their government.
Right.
That's what this is about. And so Why is the United States of America still, for all of our imperfections, 250 years into this ballgame, still the place that when you open the borders, as sadly one administration has, people don't go running out, but they come running in? Why is it the country that still gives hope to the free world? One of the reasons why is the Bill of Rights. And the Second Amendment is the one amendment that gives teeth to all of the other amendments in that Bill of Rights. And that's a value judgment we make. The Second Amendment was not written with the question of what minimizes the number of deaths. Those are other policies.
It was that you could.
So this clip was so fascinating to me. It really was, because it was such, I mean, it was cold and disturbing, but the closest thing to the most honest defense of the Second Amendment that I've heard from a Republican, and yet it was still replete with lies and half-truths. So we're going to address that. But before we do that, I do want to point out, I said in the intro that Vivek Ramaswamy is increasingly unpopular, and I just want to make the point that he indeed is. He's slipping in the polls. The growing unlikability of the tech tyro is evident in polls from 2 early states that have seen a lot of the candidates. In Iowa, the authoritative Iowa poll from Ann Seltzer shows Ramaswamy's favorability ratio deteriorating from 38% to 20% in August to 43%/37% in October. To know him better is not to love him more, it seems. And putting the matter in a slightly different way, a new CNN survey of South Carolina shows that 60% of likely primary voters have ruled out considering Ramaswamy, not far from the 71% who wouldn't think of voting for Chris Christie. Okay, so it's not looking good for Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, with respect to the Second Amendment, the other thing I want to point out, and I've had to point this out a lot, I used to do it all the time when I was more active on TikTok. The Second Amendment, like most rights, is not absolute. Any gun enthusiast or gun
but it should be.
fetishist or conservative who suggests to you that the Constitution affords you an absolute right to own a firearm is simply not true.
It said
In the 2008 Heller
be
decision, the conservative Justice Antonin Scalia, who wrote the Heller decision, which basically codified the Second Amendment as a personal right for the first time to all American citizens, even he says, like most rights, the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. The government does indeed have a vested interest and indeed is empowered to put reasonable restrictions on the Second Amendment. Then, of course, you ask, what is a reasonable restriction? And that is when it is subject to debate and policy. But the principle, the idea, does the government have a right to restrict your ability to own a firearm? Yes. Every iteration of the Supreme Court, even the most conservative, has said as much. It is a fact. It's not a matter of opinion. If you say it is, you're simply wrong. Now, the other thing I'll point out is Vivek also essentially makes the claim that the Second Amendment was enshrined basically to enable U.S. citizens to engage in rebellion against a government, right? It's basically to deter the government. It's a means to overthrow the government. Yeah. It's called the insurrectionary theory of the Second Amendment. We hear it all the time from conservatives. It's simply not true. And if you don't believe me, take it from constitutional scholar and attorney Jamie Raskin, who debunks it in about 2 minutes. You need to hear this.
Now, amazing.
Wait, what? What is he saying?
Matter of opinion. If you say it is, you're simply wrong. Now, the other thing I'll point out, the decision which basically codified the Second Amendment as a personal right for the first time to all American citizens. Even he says, like most rights, the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. The government does indeed have a vested interest and indeed is empowered to put reasonable restrictions on the Second Amendment. Then, of course, you ask, what is a reasonable restriction? And that is when it is subject to debate and policy. But the principle, the idea, does the government have a right to restrict your ability to own a firearm? Yes. Every iteration of the Supreme Court, even the most conservative, has said as much. It is a fact. It's not a matter of opinion. If you say it is, you're simply wrong. Now, the other thing I'll point out is Vivek also essentially makes the claim that the Second Amendment was enshrined basically to enable U.S. citizens to engage in rebellion against a government, right? It's basically to deter the government. It's a means to overthrow the government. It's called the insurrectionary theory of the Second Amendment. We hear it all the time from conservatives. It's simply not true. And if you don't believe me, take it from constitutional scholar and attorney Jamie Raskin, who debunks it in about 2 minutes. You need to hear this.
Now, amazing. In the wake of this savage insurrection,
if you read the writings of our founders, that is what it is for. This person might say that
the NRA and its followers in Congress,
but this person's fucking
idea that
wrong.
The Constitution, specifically the Second Amendment, gives people right to violently attack and overthrow the government of the United States. This so-called insurrectionary theory of the Second Amendment maintains that its purpose is to allow citizens to wage armed resistance if they think the government is being unfair or unjust. The reading is absurd and flies in the face of the plain text of the Constitution, which in at least 7 different places that I count clearly forbids and punishes armed resistance against the U.S. government. A few examples. The Republican Guarantee Clause, Article 4, Section 4.
If you listen to... And a lot of these things that he's talking about that are in the Constitution were amendments to the Constitution after the Constitution was originally written, too.
Provides the U.S. shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion and against domestic violence. This was written in the Constitution specifically in response to Shays' rebellion and armed resistance to the government, which the founders strongly condemned. The Treason Clause, Article 3, Section 3, Clause 1 states, treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies. What is violent insurrection against the government if not levying war against the United States? Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says, anyone is sworn an oath under the Constitution to defend it and support it, but betrays it by...
If you look at, what's his name? Thomas Jefferson wrote saying that the people should rebel against the government every 20 years or something. So he's just fucking wrong.
Shall never be allowed to hold federal or state office again. And one more example, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 says, Congress shall have the power to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Now, do our colleagues really believe that the Constitution explicitly and repeatedly gives the government the power to suppress violent insurrections, but the Second Amendment in invisible ink gives the people the right to engage in violent insurrections? This is absurd and outlandish.
As a marketer, I know that creating and scaling video content for your brand can be super difficult. That's why we use Riverside. Creating video
Indeed, it is absurd and outlandish. There's no constitutional basis for it. Now, conservatives are free to make the argument that citizens have the moral right, or the natural right, if you believe in such things, to overthrow the government if it becomes tyrannical. That's what that's how the United States was born. You can make that moral argument, but you do not have a constitutional right, which is what the Second Amendment is. It's enshrined in the Constitution. The Constitution, more specifically the Second Amendment, gives any American the right to have a firearm to overthrow the government. He's simply wrong. Now, the other thing I want to point out in his answer, which I'm not going to play the clip because it's too long and we'll be here for another 30 minutes. Vivek blames mental health, like many Republicans do in the aftermath of mass shootings. That's their latest...
I think he's going to say that Republicans don't actually care about mental health.
Latest buzzword or buzz phrase, mental health, mental health, mental health. And he does it in this interview too. And he also actually, it's funny, he begins that clip by saying he's pro-freedom, he's pro-liberty. And yet he also says that one of the solutions that he wants is to bring back psychiatric institutions in which you can involuntarily incarcerate somebody or detain them in a mental health institution. If you think somebody's crazy or mentally unwell, that you would have the ability to take their liberty from them and put them in an asylum, effectively. So it's just really interesting here. Now, again, Republicans talk a big game now, and they have for the past couple of years, about mental health. But as op-ed after op-ed after op-ed has pointed out, Republicans blame mental health issues for gun violence. So where's the money for care? Newsweek also has one. Republicans are blaming mental health for school shootings after refusing to fund it. Democrats have an opportunity to call
the way that the funding bills were just stupid.
He's bluff on mental illness. Either Republicans are going to vote yes on policy and money that fund much-needed services, or they're going to concede that they don't think mental health is the cause of mass shootings. Well, we had that opportunity, and Republicans voted against it. School-based mental health services back in September 2022, and every Republican voted against it. So it's interesting. They think that mental health is the problem, but they don't want to do anything about improving mental health. It's interesting. Makes you wonder if Republicans are actually good for solving problems, because even if they're correct, they have absolutely no intention whatsoever of doing anything about it, except apparently in Vivek's case, just throw people in an asylum. But there's actually also evidence to suggest that addressing mental health concerns in and of themselves, while actually beneficial for society, which they obviously would be, may not have that much of an impact on reducing gun violence. Researchers said the problem that separates mental health issues, the mental health crisis in this country, is a separate problem from mass shootings. Many of those who spoke to Advance pointed to studies that report about 96% of gun violence incidents in the U.S. are caused by factors other than mental illness. As one of the experts cited says, as a psychiatrist, I say I'm a traitor to my people if I cast aspersions on people who want to fund mental health. Please do. But it's unlikely to have an effect on mass shootings, says Dr. Amy Barnhorst, Associate Director for the California Firearm Violence Research Center at the University of California, Davis, blah, blah, blah. So there you have it. We do have a mental health issue crisis in this country, and it should be addressed. But Republicans don't want to address it. In fact, they actively oppose legislative efforts to address it. And then even if it is addressed, there's actually little evidence to suggest that it will reduce the specific problem of gun violence, which also makes you wonder, are we alone in all the world? As far as developed nations, or as any nation with mental health issues, is there something uniquely mentally unhealthy about the United States compared to the United Kingdom or the European Union, the countries in the European Union, Canada, or whatever else? It's interesting because Republicans used to be the party of American exceptionalism.
If you look at the stats of not just gun violence, and you look at the stats of like just violent crimes in general, we're basically exactly the same.
The party of patriotism, we're so exceptional, we're so extraordinary.
People are getting
and yet
stabbed
they're implicitly suggesting that we are uniquely mentally unwell in a way that all these other countries aren't. And by the way, also the idea that the Second Amendment is necessary to preserve freedom. Well, the United Kingdom is free.
There's not people dying.
France is free. Germany's free. Belgium is free. Canada's free. Nordic countries are free. They don't have the Second Amendment. What are you talking about? What liberties do you and I enjoy every day that require stone? I'm free, but I don't own a gun. How can I possibly be free if I don't own a gun? And as Jon Stewart pointed out, the idea that more guns equals more freedom or more safety. As he pointed out in a viral conversation last year, we have more guns in the United States than people. At what point does the number of guns make us safer? Like we have more than 560 mass shootings per year. How many will it take for us to actually have fewer mass shootings if we already have more guns than people? The argument is ridiculous. It's absurd. It's based on feelings, not facts whatsoever. But I'll conclude by saying this. What I found most interesting about Vivek Ramaswamy's stance on the Second Amendment, other than all the lies that he told, which are characteristic of the Republicans, was the fact that it was the closest anybody has ever come to basically saying that they value just the abstract right to own a gun over protecting children and civilians. Listen to what he said. It's not about a technocratic, decision to reduce killings. It's not about some arbitrary standard to reduce lives. The Second Amendment is not about protecting people or reducing deaths. There's a risk involved, he says. It's a different value judgment. And so I would encourage you, if you're watching, how much do you value just your arbitrary right to own whatever gun you want over your safety, the safety of your neighbors, the safety of your friends, safety of your parents, your spouses, your partners, your coworkers, your children? That's a big one.
Way more
your children.
Violent
and
crimes
since
that are
we've already
stopped
tried the
by
route of more guns
than
equals more safety equals more freedom, and it doesn't really seem to be producing results,
by guns.
perhaps we should consider doing what other countries
By
do
people with
and
guns.
applying certain restrictions on our right to own guns, which again, constitutionally, that's enshrined. The Constitution does allow for the right to limit your right to own a firearm. Maybe we should try that. We've tried it the other way. Maybe we should try it in a way that might produce a different result. Let me know what you think in the comments. And let me know what you think about Vivek's very cold, very blunt answer to the question about what does the Second Amendment mean to him and what does he think of gun control. Let me know what you think in the comments.
This is Glowforge Aura, your personal craft laser. Plug it in, connect, and push the button. The beam of light dances, bringing your vision to life. Welcome Glowforge Aura into your home. Unleash your creativity.
We haven't talked in 2 months, and everything in the world has happened since
Has
then, so-
happened. I know it's true. You know, who's sleeping right now? I'm not near bed at all. Anyway, I'm sure you've been talking about this stuff like every day on. I know because I watch your streams. I know you've been talking about this stuff a lot. So I hope we didn't just bring you on and it's like, let's talk more about these like horrible things that are going on in the world. I do kind of just want to meme and goof with you.
No,
but
it's important.
And we haven't talked about it really. So
it's on everyone's mind to some extent as well. There's not really any escaping it, I think.
yeah, well, I mean, even my whole thing is like I'm posting just like goofy, silly shit online, you know. And I was kind of like even talking to my friends like, should I even be doing this? Is this the wrong thing to do? Like, do I need to kind of just like chill out?
It's objectively the right thing to do.
Well, that's kind of what the conclusion I came to is like really the only thing that I can. I mean, not that this is any help to anybody, but it's like the best contribution that I can make is to just try to do what I'm good at. You know what I mean? And just try to like make people happy. And so I'm really trying to avoid, you know, any like really negative stuff or engaging with that stuff. I just want people to kind of be able to escape when they see my material. But even that, it's tough. You know what I mean? It's tough sometimes.
Yeah, fully. Well, I mean, I always enjoy when I see your guys' comics. Obviously, I'm kind of biased in this because I know you guys, but I think that you know, it's like you said, right? It's about like getting burnt out. I think even people who are
Joe Rogan equates the flat earth movement with the true origins of Christianity, basically saying that is where it came from. The Bible is where the flat earth came from. Let's get into this conversation. This is from episode 2039 with Michael Easter, and they get into the flat earth conversation. Very interesting stuff. Go ahead.
He took me, around the ISS and showed me the place over Zoom.
So he's talking about his friend that was in space, maybe an astronaut or something, showing him through the space station and then out the window through Zoom or something like that.
So his friend was in space, which is real.
Yep. I mean,
space is real.
To each their own.
And called him on Zoom and was showing him the Earth.
Yep. So he's
this is
targeting.
fake.
Wow.
And then two, at one point he flips the screen and shows me the Earth. At least in that instance, I can tell you that it was round.
Maybe it's just a disc.
Could be.
That's what a lot of the in-deep people think. They think it's a disc. I think it's all a religious thing. They think that they're going off of some passages in the Bible where they refer to the firmament, and they refer to like they believe somehow there's like this dome over the Earth, and that the stars, there's lights.
Hold on. How does he know this much about this position?
You know conspiracy theories.
This man said he literally is reciting all the talking points of the Christian flat earthers, except the actual Bible verse, which he could probably track those down. But there's a whole thing of this. Like they talk about this, talk about the firmament, they talk about the dome, they talk about all these things over the Earth as being a disc. Wow.
Like if you actually want to watch someone who talks about this, John Zerka talks
I read that one today. I was
about
like, oh
this
boy. And then some people think that stars are fake. They don't think space is real. They think
it's like we're living in the Truman Show. You remember the Truman Show?
Yeah,
when there's a big doom and you're looking out, but you think you're looking at the sky, but it's all superficial, artificial light. And it's not that he's on an island. He's literally in a massive set.
Yeah.
That's kind of what this position holds to.
They think it's
like a big Mr. Beast video.
It's like a big Mr. Beast video.
They think it's all a con by Satan or someone, and then that all these space agencies are in cahoots with Satan, which is really wild to think about. Like, did they deny like how much did they deny? Did they deny satellites? Like, do you believe in DirecTV? Is that a satellite? Okay. Do you believe that the satellites are taking photos? Are they taking any? What about the weather patterns? What about their ability to discern weather patterns as they move across the globe? What about the flight patterns? What about the fact you can actually track planes as they go around the globe?
I mean, the most egregious one is when they've repeatedly offered to fly folks from South America to Australia, and based on a flat Earth map, that would take I want to say over 10 hours, and you can like make the flight way shorter. And they say that the way that's possible is that there's these like super fast wind currents that make that flight path possible and cut the time in half.
Wow.
Like, what do you think about that?
So that's what Joe Rogan had to say. Now we're kind of going to dive into some of the Christians that actually believe this stuff.
Okay.
Because I think it's important to have context.
So this is going to give us the Bible verses that they use to form this firmament position, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Guys right there. They, might know their own language. Call me crazy. I know that's insane for me to suggest such a thing. But these Jewish scholars who took their own Hebrew scriptures and turned it into their English version, the JPS Tanakh Bible, they said circle of the earth. They didn't say reeling, rocking, rolling, orbiting, spinning, globe, sphere, earth. They said circle of the earth. New American Standard, vault of the earth. That's interesting. They threw the word vault in there. Jubilees Bible, Jubilee Bible 2000 circle of the earth. King James 2000 circle of the earth. American King James circle of the earth. American Standard version circle of the earth.
Circle.
Dewey Rhymes Bible on the globe of the earth. Oh, that's interesting. Dewey Rhymes. Well, that would be following on the heels of the Copernican Revolution, so that doesn't really surprise me, especially since this is a Catholic Bible.
Hold on, it's a Catholic conspiracy?
Yeah, yeah. He's saying everything post Copernicus or whatever his name is.
Oh my God. Okay, hold on. This is the part.
Yeah.
Theory of a heliocentric universe was well known at the upper strata of the Catholic Church in his lifetime. While he preferred his theories published after his death, he ultimately agreed to publish his manuscripts on the persistent appeals of high church officials. The necessity to change public conception from an accurate belief in a flat, enclosed earth to a false belief grew slowly. With sapiens' baby steps, the whole world would become amenable to the final delusion of an alien invasion under the first woe. The Catholic hierarchy had the perfect opportunity to lay groundwork for a global deception to culminate in this Earth's final generation.
I'm a Protestant for a reason.
Okay.
Right? Like, I think Luther was definitely on to something. Luther was right, all right? We needed that to happen, but Luther was also trying to reform the church and not start a new church, and I think he was right. However, I feel like Catholics just be catching strays out here sometimes.
They do!
This turned into, there's a firmament, and the Catholic Church and NASA are in cahoots with Satan to cover it up.
Oh, that's crazy.
There's plenty of critique to go towards the Catholic Church, but this is like, this is next level. This is next level.
This deception required a globe Earth spinning throughout the vast reaches of space inhabited by aliens and other sentient life forms. These contrivances created doubt in the Bible, putting science ahead of Scripture, which advises mankind the Earth is enclosed and unmoving. They also place the Creator far away from His creation by presenting a universe unimaginably vast.
Okay, stop it. Let me just say this. And maybe this will help Rogan and people who look at this, right?
Yeah.
When you look at any movement where Christians or suppress Christians or anything, and the position becomes, we have the secret knowledge, and it's kind of only us and our crew that got it right, and everybody else got it wrong, or everybody's just not as enlightened as us. These are sure signs of like cult-like behavior. I'm not calling these folks in a cult, but they're cult-like behavior. And you can have cult-like behavior and not necessarily be like in an official cult, but be in a mentality where you're trying to be preserved as this like one and only remnant that has all the answers and has all the things figured out, and everybody else is wrong. And just logically speaking, I think God is way bigger than that. Like, God's heart is that none should perish. God's heart is that all should come to Him. And God's heart is definitely not that the billions of Christians that have walked the earth have all been under this mass delusion, and everyone else got this wrong except this tiny small remnant that still holds this position.
And then what would you say to the people that go to the Bible to interpret their scientific findings?
But it does say that it's a small...
Well, I would say they're misinterpreting the Bible first and foremost. I think they're getting the Bible wrong, right? And so I think if you're getting the Bible wrong, then you're going to use your wrong interpretation of the Bible to interpret your view of science. And I think that's what it is. Like, you have to go to the Bible for what it is, which is not a scientific textbook, first of all, right? And then you have aspects of science that aren't spiritual; they're natural. So you could easily make a categorical error on both ends of the extreme. You go to the Bible for science, you go to science for spirituality.
Yeah.
Dr. Drew and my wife Susan here, we want to show you something.
This is what just 10 pounds of body fat looks like. If we want
spiritual realms, and then that's not what those. This science is there to examine the natural world, not to give us answers about what's happening in the spiritual world, right? So yeah.
And these are the types of people that these are the types of stories and beliefs that create the stupid little yard sign that says like science is real. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like no one's debating science is real except for maybe these guys.
Yeah. And by the way, when I say like you don't go to the Bible for science, I'm not saying that there aren't things that are true in the Bible about science. Right? The Bible talks about natural things.
Yeah.
Sow, reap, right? It's talking about natural things that are scientific. I'm saying that the Bible is not a scientific textbook, right? The Bible is about God's covenant with His people and being on mission to redeem us and save us from our sin and the world and hell ultimately, and God pressing into His people and trying to redeem His people. That's what the Bible's about.
And it's communicating that message.
In all types of different genres. There's poetry, there's music, there's history, there's prophecy. But it's not a scientific textbook.
Yeah. The same way that we don't go, wow, you don't believe in science if you say, what time is the sun rise this morning? The sun doesn't rise.
Right. It's a figure of speech.
It's a figure of speech.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So this guy named Rob Skiba, kind of the face of this movement.
One of the country's most prominent advocates of flat Earth theory, Shaikba was also skeptical of COVID-19 vaccines and some of the illnesses treatments. On the first day of the Take on the World conference, Shika authored a Facebook post suggesting that the COVID-19 vaccines were dangerous.
Which, to be fair, there's some suggestive findings on
amongst young people, and what is it, myelocolitis, the heart condition, amongst young people, and just at sheer volume of scale, there's going to be issues when you have a billion anything, you're going to have some side effects and some issues and some injury, to this sort of thing. Shout out to Inspiring Philosophy. Okay.
She says, proven scripture where it clearly teaches the Earth is flat. You're going to need reference the original Koinonia and Hebrew, because I have. And then she goes with her head covering 1 Chronicles 16:30.
He's gonna blow a head basket.
Yeah. These hyperliteral readings of biblical verses are insane. For one, we know the earth is round, and we've known that for thousands of years. Two, this is special. You're not going to take hyperliteral readings of other verses. Let me show you. Proverbs 23:16, my inmost being will exult when your lips speak what is right. But the word there for inmost being is kidneys. So do you think your kidneys are literally going to grow a mouth and start rejoicing? Hebrews 7 says Levi was in the loins of Abraham when he was before Melchizedek. So do you think Levi was literally inside of Abraham, or do you agree with modern science that Levi came into existence at conception? Psalm 91 says he will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. So do you think God is a giant chicken?
That's a joke, boy. You make it right past you. You gotta keep on your toes.
The Bible's not a scientific textbook.
Come on.
It's a book on theology, morality, and history. You're trying to take the literal meaning of the words to derive scientific facts, when what you should actually be doing is trying to understand the theological or moral message the words are intending for you to get. For example, it's like if I said, love the Lord your God with all your heart. I do not mean the thing that pumps blood. I mean love God from your innermost being.
Amen.
You're not supposed to take the literal meaning of my words, but understand you're supposed to get a theological message out of the metaphors I used. What you're doing is confusing locution with illocution. And if you want more, I have an in-depth video on my channel which goes into detail.
Hey, massive W from Aspiring Philosophy. We should have him back on the channel sooner than later. I dearly appreciate him. I think this is
like Aspiring Philosophy.
We see according to the Bible that prayer is extremely important in terms of us being transformed from the inside out when we get aligned with God's will. For the Christians watching this channel, I want you guys to implement these spiritual disciplines in your day-to-day life. And the only way I've been able to do this consistently is through writing down my prayers in a prayer journal that does a few things. One, it allows me to reflect and come to God humbly and ask him to move on my behalf. And two, it allows me to document my prayers, which ultimately help me remember the very things that I was praying for and see the hand of God tangibly in my life when he answers them. So I would urge you, consider writing down your prayers. It could be in a blank notebook. It could even be on your phone. Or you could check out the one I personally designed and used from my own quiet.
Did you know you can get someone to shop for you? With Stitch Fix, it couldn't be easier. I share my style, size, and budget, and they shop just for me. My shopper sends me stuff I feel good in.
Direct from the Broski Nation headquarters in Los Angeles, California, this is the Broski Report with your host, Brittany Broski.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Broski Report. I'm Brittany Broski. Okay, I'm like, cut the bullshit today. I have so much that's like on my heart. I have so much. I was just sitting in the living room, and I literally was like, oh, more than 10 minutes ago. I was sitting on my couch. I will not show you who it is because I still want him, okay? I said, baby, it's okay. You can post cock pics on Twitter. Just come home to me.
What the fuck?
Baby, you can post hog all day and all night. We have got to keep the lights on, but come home to me, okay? That's how I'm feeling in this moment. If you need to post your taint, video chat so you can meet your match before meeting in real life. Other apps are hard, to say the absolute least. So, yeah, that's kind of going to be my segue into songs of the week, okay? Songs of the week, guys. Gotta burp. In an afterlife, reflecting on her former life after she was violently murdered. The thing about it is really resonating with me, it seems. August Underground is an instrumental and sets the mood for when she dies trying to escape Isaiah. Who is Isaiah? The song is also a reference to the snuff film August Underground. Oh.
What the fuck?
This album is supposed to summarize her life after her father died 10 years prior to the album. Yes, this is what I was talking about. Ethel Cain's Preacher's Daughter is a concept album, a story told by a girl that exists in an afterlife, reflecting on her former life after she was violently murdered and cannibalized by one of her lovers. It's a coming-of-age queer story where religious trauma inflicts the main character and results in her ultimate death.
Sounds cringe as fuck.
The album opens with a track titled Family Tree intro, an introduction to the album's fifth song.
I want to see the part where
it begins with a
said,
faint noise of a preacher speaking inaudibly in the background. I just gotta chill. By the way, just gotta chill. When the % off the next 2 months. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Blessed be the daughters of Cain, bound to suffering eternal through the sins of their fathers committed long before their conception. Blessed be their whore mothers, tired and angry, waiting with to wrap up the album in a sad but hopeful way. I do. Heard you, saw you, felt you, gave you, need you, love you, love you, love you. What? Get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients. I am the face of love's rage. I am the face of love's rage. Blessed be the daughters of Cain, bound to suffering eternal through the sins of their father. Hold on, pause! Are you bitches hearing this? Blessed be the daughters of Cain. Do y'all know the story of Cain and Abel?
That's creepy as fuck.
Little history. Cain, the firstborn, was a farmer, and his brother Abel was a shepherd. The brothers made sacrifices to God, but God favored Abel's sacrifice instead of Cain's. Cain then murdered Abel, whereupon God punished Cain by condemning him to a life of wandering. This episode is sponsored by HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Kickstart a fresh fall routine with HelloFresh. HelloFresh handles all the meal planning and shopping to deliver everything you need to cook up a tasty meal right at home. They do the hard part, and you get to take the credit. When it comes to options, honestly, more is more. That's why HelloFresh's menu includes 40 recipes and over 100 add-on items to choose from every week. I live alone, I travel a lot. HelloFresh is the perfect portion for me to cook just for myself, maybe some leftovers if I'm trying to do that. If not, it works really well with my schedule. So go to HelloFresh.com/50broski and use code 50broski for 50% off plus 15% off the next 2 months. Go to HelloFresh.com/50broski and use code 50broski for 50% off plus 15% off the next 2 months. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Blessed be the daughters of Cain, bound to suffering eternal through the sins of their fathers committed long before their conception. Blessed be their whore mothers, tired and angry, waiting with bated breath in a ferry that will never move again. Blessed be the children, each and every one come to know their God through some senseless act of violence. Blessed be you, girl, promised to me by a man who can only feel hatred and contempt towards you. Oh my god, shit. Weird. Blessed be you, girl, promised to me by a man who can only feel hatred and contempt towards you. I am no good nor evil, simply I am, and I have come to take what is mine. I was there in the dark when you spilled your first blood. I am here now as you run from me still. Run then, child. You can't hide from me forever. I
What
have
the
chills
fuck
all
is
over my
this?
fucking body, and I just got my legs waxed today, and if that hair grows back quick, I'm gonna be fucking pissed off. Oh my god. Is this written from the perspective of God? Or is she switching perspectives? What fear a man like you brings upon a woman like me? I am no good nor evil, simply I am, and I have come to take what is mine. I was there in the dark when you spilled your first blood. I am here now as you run from me still. Run, or is it death? Run then, child. You can't hide from me forever. Oh, it's death. I've come to take what's mine. It's death. It's her life. They're taking her life. I was there in the dark when you spilled your first blood, and I'm here now. Oh my god. People, here's what's really upsetting about this sort of art. People aren't ready for it. People are not under this guise, this mask of, well, I just want to learn. I just want to learn why you think that way. And it's like, I can't explain basic human empathy to you. There's and crying and hands on each other's backs. And, you know, I remember literally faking it. And you can call them godly, sure.
I got something that's never been done before.
I don't feel like watching
30
that,
teams, 6 groups, 8 advance, 1 NBA Cup.
I wish that she had it.
Right here.
I don't feel like watching that whole thing. I just wanted to watch the part about
The rats are leading the
Christian
Trump ship.
church.
Yes, several of Trump's alleged co-conspirators, or no, I guess
wish that
verified
you had
admitted co-conspirators at this point, are pleading guilty in Georgia. Our resident prosecutor and criminal law expert Scowell explains what that means for Sidney Powell and others, but things have been happening just so fast and nobody wants to be the last rat on the ship. So stay until the end where I talk about immunity for Mark Meadows and Jenna Ellis taking a plea deal as well.
Sidney Powell, a former Trump lawyer and one of 19 defendants in the Fulton County election
fuck?
interference
Who's
case,
this guy?
just pled guilty to improperly interfering in the 2020 presidential election. Powell shot to internet infamy after she appeared on Fox Business with a promise to release the Kraken, a reference to her belief that the election was stolen by a shadowy cabal of evildoers led by voting systems.
It's been organized and conducted with the help of Silicon Valley people, the big tech companies, the social media companies, and even the media companies. And I'm going to release the Kraken.
Powell vowed, expose the perpetrators, and return Trump to the White House. She filed lawsuits in swing states across the country. However, every single one of her lawsuits crashed and burned, or should we say torpedoed and drowned. Because as it turns out, Powell didn't have a shred of evidence to support her frankly unhinged conspiracy theories. Yet every time the courts shot down Powell's theories, she doubled down on her claims, accusing everyone who disagreed with it of being in on it. Here she is accusing an Australian reporter of being undercover for Smartmatic.
What actual research or fact-checking did you do at the time to find out what Smartmatic's actual involvement in the election was?
Do you work for Smartmatic?
Powell walked out of that interview after she was confronted with her lies. When asked whether facts matter, Powell said,
Yes, they do. I hope we get to it one of these days as to what really happened in our election and all the people who are responsible for it.
Well, guess what? We have finally figured out who was responsible for what happened in the election, and the call was coming from inside the House.
Are you pleading guilty today because you agree that there is a sufficient factual basis, that there are enough facts that support this plea of guilty?
I do.
Powell now admits that
What
she
the
was the one
fuck?
who broke the law. Not Dominion, not Smartmatic. Two of her co-conspirators, lawyer Ken the Cheese Chesbrough and bail bondsman Scott Hall, also pled guilty. Now that the
I
dominoes
think
are
that
falling
this
in
is
Fulton
because
County,
they're
what does this
afraid.
mean for Donald Trump? Once upon a midnight dreary, Fox News became the first network to project that Biden won Arizona. It was the right call, but it proved to be a ratings disaster.
I'm sorry, the president is not going to be able to take over and win enough votes to eliminate that 7-point lead.
Fox viewers viewed this as a betrayal, and they started to abandon the network. This created an opportunity for Sidney Powell, an imaginative lawyer with lots of conspiracy theories about voting machines. Powell appeared on network dozens of times, where she explained that Dominion and Smartmatic used an algorithm that flipped votes for Trump to votes for Biden.
That probably ran all over the country to take a certain percentage of votes from President Trump and flip them to President Biden, which we might never have uncovered had the votes for President Trump not been so overwhelming in so many of these states that it broke the algorithm.
To be clear, this is all poppycock. Behind the scenes, Powell had presented Fox News with a memo entitled Election Fraud Info that was written by an anonymous source who claimed the wind tells her she's a ghost. Fox hosts concluded that Powell was not playing with a full deck. Sidney Powell is a bit nuts. Fox host Laura Ingraham wrote to Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity on November 15th, 2020.
If you're a content creator and you're not using Kajabi, you're leaving money on the table. Make it.
Sidney Powell is lying, Carlson told his producer the next day. Nevertheless, Fox repeatedly turned to Powell to win its viewers back. She teamed up with Rudy Giuliani to promote the theory that the election had been stolen. In November, Powell met with other Trump loyalists and lawyer Lynn Wood's South Carolina estate, which happens to be a former rice plantation called Cotton Hall. The group included former Overstock CEO Patrick Byrne, Mike Flynn, and Doug Logan, the CEO of cybersecurity firm Cyber Ninjas. Logan would later be known as Individual 25 in the Fulton County case. The Trump gang enjoyed Thanksgiving dinner at Cotton Hall, where Mike Flynn was given the honor of carving the turkey. In between servings of mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce, the group brainstormed ways that Trump would still win the election. Wood remembers Powell making phone calls to Georgia and theorizing that the communist government of Venezuela played a role in Biden's victory. Eventually, they agreed that they needed to get their hands on digital copies of data and software used on voting machines. Meanwhile, down in Georgia, Powell's theories got the attention of election officials in Coffee County, Georgia, a rural county where over 70% of voters chose Donald Trump. Despite Trump's big win, local elections officials decided that someone had tampered with their voting machines. These officials included Kathy Latham, Misty Hampton, Eric Cheney, and Ed Voiles. They all agreed that the election had been rigged. Later, they would participate in an alleged conspiracy to give unauthorized people access to voting equipment. In December, Powell cited Coffee County to make her case to Donald Trump that the federal government should seize the voting machines. She helped draft 2 orders that would have authorized the seizure, citing Coffee County as proof that the orders were justified. On December 18th, Powell met with Trump and urged him to appoint her as special counsel to investigate voter fraud. Needless to say, Trump did not go forward with seizing the voting machines, but Powell and Giuliani hatched a plan to obtain the machines voluntarily. Powell already had a contract with a forensic company called Sullivan Stickler to inspect voting machines in Michigan. The Georgia indictment alleges that Powell also brought the group to Georgia. The indictment says Powell paid Sullivan Strickler for the purpose of willfully tampering with electronic ballot markers and tabulating machines, which were overt acts to affect the object of the conspiracy to interfere with the result. In December, Georgia completed a third machine recount of the vote. However, Coffee County refused to certify the outcome, claiming an inability to repeatedly duplicate creditable election results. The county determined that its vote count was off by 51 votes. When the Georgia Secretary of State investigated, he found that the discrepancy was caused by human error, probably because Hampton couldn't remember if she scanned a stack of ballots twice or not. But the conspirators were not about to give up, and that's how they ended up co-defendants with Sidney Powell. On January 7th, the day after the riot at the Capitol, these local officials allowed people from Sullivan Strickler to spend hours examining voting systems in the county, as you can see in this security video. Powell allegedly paid them for their time. Scott Hall, a bail bondsman and future co-defendant, flew down from Atlanta to help. Once in the Coffee County Elections Office, the analysts copied Georgia's statewide voting system software. According to a recorded phone call, they scanned all the equipment, imaged all the hard drives, and scanned every single ballot.
We scanned every freaking ballot.
The defendants also took official ballots outside of the polling place. Well, as it turns out, Georgia law requires ballots to remain in the custody of election officials and Superior Court clerks.
Do not be fooled by our politeness. Our bows are made of rituals.
How being ugly is a blessing. How being ugly is a blessing. Look at me. Look at my black heads. Look at that. Look at my hairline. Look how pale I am. I almost become invisible as I walk by. True story, right? See, let's define ugly. We know what ugly is not.
You're not ugly. You're average at worst. Is this man ugly?
Yes. Judging by some people's standard, yeah, he is.
So general. We're talking about in general society. And some people, individual, yes. On average, you think this guy's getting below a 5. Below a 5. Hold on.
I almost become invisible.
All depends on how tall he is and stuff like that, but yeah. I think he could get a 4. Mm-hmm. Depending for some people. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's like horrid. I've seen some horrid people. Like, this shit is all jacked up. I wouldn't give him a 2. I wouldn't give him a 3. But he knows. It's fine. It's okay.
You're not ugly. You're not even close to it. You're at best, worst average, and you're probably going to be hovering around 5, 6s, and 7s. Some people are even going to find your look so different. They're going to weight you way higher, too. Because of the fact you got blonde hair and pale skin. There's going to be some people who are into that. Good build.
You think a few people think he's ugly?
I think most people just think he's just, When you say ugly, you're talking about people who are actually, like, revolting. We're talking about fucking Quasimodo from the last cut video. That's an ugly person.
You see, ugly and revolting.
Okay, if there's ugly, average, and attractive.
I think revolting is like a different level of ugly that's very, very, very ugly. You can be ugly and not be revolting.
When you're saying ugly, you're going to 2s, 3s, and 1s.
If I could get ugly in my worst case.
What do you think your rating is?
My rating is about a 6, quasi-normal day. I could climb up to, like, if I dress nice and everything and stuff, got the nice cologne and stuff like that, I could climb up to 8. If I talk about the world, I could climb to a low 8.
Generally, you take care of yourself. So you're hovering between a 6 and 7. Because most of the time, you take care of yourself.
Sure.
Okay? So that's where you're at. That's like where your score is generally.
Sure.
Okay, so you're not ugly. You're above average. Maybe it's because I've been around people who are very ugly. I've been around like the nerdy side of the world. I've been around like people who are social rejects and spend all their days. I want to be a Discord mod. Okay, that's people.
I want to be a Discord mod.
I don't think you understand the berth, the wide berth between you and those people. That's why when I hear
you're saying that, it's not even an insult.
No.
I know.
It hurts to look at some of them.
No,
it is.
What hurts the most is that it's not even, when he says it like that, it's not an insult.
No, because it's just like, bro,
it comes from a place of...
Nah, you can fight, and I believe in you to fight, but you're not doing uphill, nigga. It's straight up parallel. Like, you better walk on walls, Spider-Man, because the climb you gotta make, okay, Stephen Hawking, you gotta make a steep, okay?
I hope you have some brakes on them real.
I look at some people, and I'm like, bro, your biggest issue is that you're just average.
Okay, so you think this guy's average?
He's got a good build. He's got a very good build, wide shoulders, and you know what the thing he got going for him is? He got an interesting face. He got a face you can't help but stare at. Not for the wrong reason.
I don't know if that's a good thing.
Like, he's got like traditionally Afrocentric features, but because of the thing that makes people albino.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if he was black albino or not.
The hairline, it's proceeding, so it's not like he got balding.
He definitely looks like he's black albino.
Like, your hairline's just too far forward. Cut the bitch. Nobody cares. That's not a real problem. I can't do this. No matter how much I do this, it's not coming forward. Unless I want to get that Myron hair transplant, it's just not gonna happen. No, it's not. Okay, it's like
your hair has to grow.
You're not ugly. Listen, I was ugly for a long time, but it's because I self-sabotaged. Okay. I just have to, okay, I did. I self-sabotaged. Like, I was being stupid, okay? And even during my self-sabotage.
For no good reason.
Listen, I acknowledge
that. Like, why?
We don't need to get into that.
For no good reason, my guy. Sometimes, motherfucker, I pick you up, and then you sit in my car, and I'm like, why are you doing this?
Hey, listen, it don't even matter. You wanna know why it don't matter? Because they still So I said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But moving past that.
Why are you doing this?
I'm saying some people magnify their own rejections in life and then really harp on those to think like it's a real reflection of how most people feel about it. I think there's a certain segment of the population that overestimate. I'm a 10. Shut up, stupid. You're not even close.
No,
okay?
you're not.
And there's some people who just like, I'm super out. I know. And me, I'm like hovering to average to above average. I'm okay with that. We good. Some of y'all are ugly. But a lot of y'all are just average. And the thing about being average is like, you're kind of coasting. You can get some dates, but you don't have the experience of really attractive people. So you're like, oh, I'm not them. I must be ugly. It's like, no, trust me. Ugly people's existence is just built different. The idea of being like 1,000% invisible, a lot of you don't know it. You're not invisible, but you're hiding in your home. People can't see you because you're not outside. So all this to say, he's starting off the video saying why it's great to be ugly. I'm like, my guy, the guy from the other video who said, what was that video? Yeah. My experience being ugly? Yeah. He's ugly. Yeah. And he still found a girl. And they still together. Shout out to you. He was ugly. God bless him.
I don't know what
there
video they're talking about.
Absolutely. But is he close to that?
No.
That's all I'm saying. Listen, it's good to be self-critical, but don't be so self-critical that you're just like now mocking people.
Ugly is not what's on Vogue. Ugly is not what's on, GQ. That's not ugly. Society has a standard, and everybody who doesn't meet that, they fall short. And the further along you get in terms of how you look physically, you become more and more ugly. The further you look from GQ, the further you look from, whatever women's magazine there is, you're ugly. And that's how the world will see you, and that's how society will treat you. And I'm standing here to explain to you how I was treated as such. I'm ugly. Now, I am okay with the way I look. I gotta look good, a little bit, But I understand that in a way I am ugly, because even further from how everybody can see there's a natural way of things, I am not that. I am not the natural look. I stick out.
There's a difference between being ugly and being different. I know tall model-like women who up until end of high school were made fun of, and then right after they graduate, they're in runways in Paris, right? They were made fun of as being giants or long, lanky legs and super self-conscious. There's a difference between different and ugly.
I understand what you're saying, and you're perfectly right. The problem is how he was treated. The end result, he was treated the same way as the uglies. So to him, it doesn't make any difference. And he could see, and I believe that according to his experience, he could say that he's ugly because he lived that experience as well.
When I grew up, it was everybody treats me like I'm radioactive. Some people would come in contact with me, some people would want to get to know me, but mostly everybody around me, especially in elementary school, it was almost like being around me was dangerous to their health. It was like being around me.
That's kind of sad. Unless if he's just internalizing things and actually wasn't
in a social hierarchy sense,
getting treated that way.
Hanging around me was not cool because look at I look like a freaking like one of the mushrooms you see in your garden growing, the white ones, or like an iPod charger.
Yeah, that's crazy. And he said that shit. I was like, I see it now. I see it. I don't know. Oh shit! Hey, Super Mario, that's crazy. You do look like one of the Mario mushrooms, the ones that you used to get a little speed boost. Bro.
Just like
oh wow! I've never heard that. That's funny. That's funny.
At a young age, I got to understand that, I got to understand just how naturally evil
his eyes are a little big
because they only really care about themselves. Because hanging around me, even though we would laugh and even though we would be friendly with each other, because he didn't want other people to look at you a certain way, oh, we can't hang out. That's just one example.
That's pretty fucked up.
But how was that a blessing? How was that a blessing? Because what it taught me at a young age is that people are very fickle and they will turn their back on you. Your friends will do it. People you just meet. People will be insulting. They'll hurt you for no reason because they might have their reasons, but it doesn't necessarily matter what the reasons are. But it's okay, because I also got to experience friends who I still know to this day in elementary school, who stuck with me from kindergarten literally to now. I know people who are not like that. So there's a dichotomy. But I didn't go to say, oh man, I hate these people. You know what I'm saying? I can't believe people are like that. Why does the world have to be like this? And then all of a sudden I shoot up school, or all of a sudden I become hurtful to others because I'm trying to inflict how I'm feeling on them.
Americans are wild, bro. Yeah, listen, y'all call me stupid. Listen, I'm a good person. I didn't blow this place up. I didn't come through with that AR and give you that spray, baby. Like, I'm a good person.
Level.
They just said they didn't like it.
Your level.
Wow. Americans.
Welcome, Anne.
Thanks, Dad.
I'm sorry?
What?
The comedy of that.
Am I sweating? Yeah. Put your arms down.
Only on Hulu.
It's gonna be fun.
Learn how to drive.
Racist. Oh.
Racist.
It's a blessing because God kind of showed me look, it's all right, man. It's okay. It's okay to what? It's okay to not be accepted by the group. And this is the point of this video. See, everybody wants to be accepted. Everybody seeks validation. Because as I'm ugly, I understand that. It's okay to not be accepted. People didn't like me in high school, in kindergarten, in college, right now, at the Walmart I walk to, whenever I sit on a bus stop. People don't like me because of the way I look, but some will. But
I don't think he's that,
it's okay, because I'm not dead. No one accepts me.
Ugly. I mean, obviously he's not attractive, but I don't think that he's hideous.
I can speak what's morally right. I can tell people the truth because I don't care about the consequence of how they feel. I can be who I need to be and who I'm supposed to be and who I know God wants me to be.
All you attractive people are fake as fuck. That's what he's essentially saying. Uglies are the real truth tellers. That's essentially what he's getting at. Because he doesn't care.
I don't care about your feelings.
Because you don't care about mine.
You don't care about mine. Yeah, fuck you. You didn't care about mine. And God sent me for you to suffer my wrath. So you will know by the truth that you is a piece of garbage.
I have a confidence because I'm ugly. I have a confidence that I've been with people, with women who are very pretty, but they're the most insecure.
I do actually agree with that.
All this I'm ugly talk. I'm ugly. I've been with super hot women who are mad insecure. Yeah, I've been with the hottest.
But you've been with them because they're insecure. Anyways, carry on.
schizophrenic people you'll ever meet. They don't like themselves.
Schizophrenic.
It's like the most weirdest thing. Some of the most attractive women are like, they're the most fragile things on the planet, in the mind, in the spirit, in the heart, because they don't know their life exists in a vacuum of validation.
It's too black and white for me. It's too black and white. You know, sometimes I think you think you live on one side. Yeah, I know, black and white. I know. It's funny with his albino stuff, but you live on one side and then you just make this caricature of attractive people. Like, oh, all attractive people are insecure, or they don't like themselves, or they can't say the truth. It's like, no, there's plenty of attractive people who are very giving, considerate, kind, passionate people who are full of confidence, and it's not just built off their looks. Right? And there's some ugly people who are also ugly on the inside. There's ugly on the outside as they are on the inside. They're just vile human beings, okay? All right? You know, we have this idea of ugly people are the ones we always have to root for. They're the underdogs. No, I know ugly people are just fucking shit people, all right? And vice versa. Being part of one camp does not make you a good person. Just because you struggled and you were made fun of does not mean that you're like some good person underneath. Some of y'all just bad people too.
It's not a Disney movie.
No, it's not.
Like that.
It's not. Like, I've met some attractive women who are some of the sweetest human beings, and they're always consistent that they've been at their entire lives. But I think we make these caricatures because we're not part of one club. We need to ostracize the other one and then make them come down, right? Oh, rich people, all these money grubbing. It's just not the case. And there's some poor people out there that I know are just trash. They're stealing. They're beating people up. They're raping folks. It is what it is. Watching this guy's video just felt like everyone's in one camp or the other, and that to me, I don't think it's just very honestly reflective. It just sounds like you're speaking from a place of hurt, and you want to kind of pejoratively speak about the other side. So,
that's not the point, but that's what you end up doing.
Yeah.
Anyways,
you still think he's really ugly now that you've heard the whole thing?
Nope.
I'm just saying that dude. I looked at him for 2 seconds, and if you told me a guy with a bunch of hot women, I would not be shocked. Well, the other guy from the other video, my experience. If you'd have told me him, I'd have been like, yo, we need some investigating. Where the CIA at? We need to get the feds on this because I don't understand how this is happening. So I'm just trying to say there's levels to everything. I know sometimes people want to claim they nerds, but really they just watched a few Marvel movies. It feels like some people want to claim they ugly because they got rejected sometimes. Chill. You're not ugly. You're just human. People say no.
And also, if your ugly experience is really just what happened when you were in school and stuff like that, you're no longer in that stage no more. You know what I mean? A lot of people are ugly back then. So it's like our heads nearly like 3 times the rest of our body. When that's not a real proportion. You know what I mean? Other than that, so you talk about, oh yeah, I'm ugly. That's present tense. And then why you ugly? Well, because when I was a kid, that was the past. Tell me why you're ugly now. Tell me why you're ugly now. All because you know the magazine and this and that. Actually, and sometimes in the Vogue, there is sometimes people that look like you and they are models. You know, people that have like a lot of freckles because
that is
they
true.
Get out there and they become models. People that are not they're not in the spectrum of everything. They still look good because they're appealing.
Albino
Tell me
models.
why now. If the most of your explanation is from back then, that don't really count. No, that don't really count as for now. Yeah, maybe you was ugly back then, but what do you know when you were a kid? You don't even dress your goddamn self. You don't even make your lunch. That's a good point. You don't even make your lunch. You don't dress yourself. You don't. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of factors around you that makes that you're ugly. But really, it's not ugly or not ugly. It's privilege or not. Okay. And so right now, tell me now.
Yeah. I think I figured it out.
Go ahead.
I think we're all living our own experience as like a first-person protagonist type thing. And then our reference is always in reference to like attractive people because they're the ones we see in the media, they're the ones we see on the magazine, and they're the ones we see on social media. And we're like, I'm not living that life. I'm not getting their kind of response. If I'm not part of their club, I must inherently be part of the ugly club because I'm not in that tribe.
Yeah.
But the realization is like most of us are somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Because the downtrodden, the truly poor people, the ones you'll never really get to witness unless you go to some of these fucking slums, you don't know their experience. You live somewhere here in the middle where you still got issues, but you don't got this bottom tier, but you also don't have this one because you're not here at the top layer, right? Of the cake. You feel like you must be straight at the bottom. It's just not the case. So because that's just our frame of reference. Our frame of reference is the ones we see all the time.
Also, what happened when I was a kid, I was treated like what he says he was treated. You know what I mean? I was treated like an ugly kid. I even say it. When I was a kid, I was an ugly kid because I was also invisible, right? But being invisible is actually being average. Sometimes you're not ugly. It's just that the people around you are just silent. So they don't voice their thing out. And the people that are voicing, they're voicing ugly, but the people that are attracted or whatever, they just don't voice it out because of shy, whatever. So you only believe one thing. And our brain as human beings, we always sometimes focus on negative. Most of the time we focus on the negative, even if there's a bunch of very positive.
Yeah.
You have all these comments, all these positive comments, that one negative comment is going to get at you. So you disregard all the positive comments.
Didn't you tell me that you had some times where some girls approached you and tried to hit on you and just like, now you're lying?
Because of the lived experience in the past, but yes, absolutely.
Right. So that doesn't mean that you weren't necessarily invisible. It's like, first off, it's terrifying to go and approach your crush. Because I know, I was a giant pussy when I was in school. So there's probably a lot of people who did like you or did find you cute or attractive or whatever, but they just didn't even think about approaching you.
But the ones that were loud were the ones that thought I was ugly. It's really easy to say that I was ugly. So was I really ugly? Maybe not.
I don't even think you necessarily were invisible.
Yeah,
you know, there were people who seen you. You know what? Just like you said, they just weren't voicing it.
They were not voicing it.
Yeah.
So you have to take that accountability and stuff like that. So yeah, that's just a bit of what I got to say.
That's a good observation. I like that. I like that what you said in regards to what happened to you as a kid doesn't necessarily define you today. That's all for today's video. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you guys agree, disagree with us? Y'all think this guy's really ugly? I don't know. Let us know.
This week, the Metropolitan Police in London were videotaped removing posters with pictures of hostages taken by Hamas. The posters were being removed from Cullimore Chemist in Edgware. The chemist's CEO, Hassan Khan, recently retweeted posts branding Israel and the IDF, quote, filthy animals, and encouraging Iran and Hezbollah to attack Israel. This naturally caused some properly earned angst. After all, the removal of such posters has become the domain of anti-Semites across the world. So what was the police's excuse for removing the posters? They explained, quote, both people who reported the posters to us were concerned that would escalate an already tense situation. Officers went to the shop, and acting in good faith, they removed the posters in an effort to prevent any such escalation. We do not wish to limit the rights of anyone to protest or to raise awareness of the plight of those kidnapped and the terrible impact on their families, but we do have a responsibility to take reasonable steps to stop issues escalating and to avoid any further increase in community tension. Stop the escalation, prevent the community tension. That's the important thing. Well, yesterday, the Metropolitan Police reportedly arrested a man for posting a video criticizing people for putting up Palestinian flags around his neighborhood. Here is the video.
And this is the kind of that's going on. Yeah. So look at this. Yeah, you see it? And then over here, this one.
The Palestinian flags just on flagpoles all around his neighborhood.
Yeah. And then they come along to this pole here, and they've done the same crap here as well. Look at this. See this? This is what we're dealing with. This is no on and then up this one here. You see that? Yeah.
Literally every flagpole, Palestinian flag.
This is what we're dealing with. These here on the top. Look at this one. On the top. Ghana. This one. Yeah. Look at this.
Okay, so this guy was then arrested. Here was the video of his arrest.
Belgium is supposed you do not attend any events involved with Palestine, okay? The reasons why we did this is on the 17th of the 10th of 2023, on Bethel Green Road at 10:04. You were witnesses saying, obviously, people, while they're over here, etc., we let them into our country, etc.
So, big deal.
Yeah, okay.
So, big deal.
Why don't you only tell questions?
Say that. Take him. Disgusting. He's a disgusting. Absolute. I'm a stage 4 cancer patient and I need to be here. Make a scene of shoes. It's make the scene you're arresting him because he said something.
I wish that it had like subtitles or something so I could see what the hell they're saying.
Did you hear that? What? Like all those Palestinian flags in Bethnal Green Road. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Why didn't you tell them? Why didn't you tell them?
That one chick, I couldn't
for saying,
understand what the fuck
why
she
are
was
these people
saying
in our
at
country? Meaning people who are posting Palestinian flags in the middle of giant rallies for Hamas. Now, the police did not remove the Palestinian flags, for the sake of community tension. In the current moment, those flags are clearly meant to support Hamas. After all, there were no rallies with Palestinian flags prior to October 7th happening in Great Britain. If there were true separation in cause between the so-called pro-Palestinian protesters we see on the streets and the pro-Hamas protesters, one might imagine that pro-Palestinian protesters would call for Hamas's ouster and surrender so as to make way for a peace process. Not one moment of that has materialized. None at all. Zero zip zilch. But the British police didn't touch the flags in the name of relieving community tension or anything. Instead, they arrested the man who wondered why Britain would import the kinds of people who would post Palestinian flags on street poles while Hamas is holding human babies hostage. Remember, the tensions must be reduced. Pure Talk recently announced they would alleviate $10 million in veteran debt by Veterans Day. Thanks to your support last week, they are 74% of the way to that goal with 2 weeks to go. Think about this. The U.S. military is made up of 100% volunteers. These are men and women. The deadline has just passed. I know many of you might be dreading the stress of filing your taxes. Filing your taxes can be long, excruciating, but if you fail to file, you'll start to pile penalties on your tax debt. That's why you need to check out Tax Network USA. The team over at Tax Network USA has a track record of success. They've reduced tax debts for numerous clients, totaling over $1 billion. Whether you're looking at a $10,000 or $1 million tax debt, they can help you with a settlement. It doesn't matter if you haven't filed in a year, 5 years, even a whole decade. Tax Network USA is equipped to secure the best settlement for you. Their expert attorneys and tax professionals can help resolve all tax cases, no matter how they started. Don't let tax debt control your life any longer. I know it's been hanging over your head. Help get rid of it today. Take the first step toward resolving your tax issues by visiting taxnetworkusa.com/Shapiro. That's taxnetworkusa.com/Shapiro. Today, again, taxnetworkusa.com/Shapiro. There are 2 ways to reduce tension in a community. The first is to cave to those who are the most radical and the most dangerous. In this case, the Hamas supporters. Criminalize anyone who would ask just why a community in the West should be expected to contain people who support Hamas. Take them to jail for asking that question on tape. And the second way to lower community tensions is to recognize that those very people who defend Hamas on tape. And the second way to lower community tension, criminalize anyone who would ask just why a community in the West should be expected to contain people who support Hamas. Take them to jail for asking that question on tape. And the second way to lower community tensions is to recognize that those very people who defend Hamas are a danger to the most radical and the most dangerous. In this case, the Hamas supporters. Criminalize anyone who would ask just why a community in the West should be expected to contain people who support Hamas. Take them to jail for asking that question on tape. Supporters. Criminalize anyone who would ask just why a community in the West hanging over your head. Help get rid of it today. Take the first step toward resolving your tax issues by visiting taxnetworkusa.com/Shapiro. That's taxnetworkusa.com/Shapiro. Today, again, taxnetworkusa.com/Shapiro. There are 2 ways to reduce tension in a community. The first is to cave to those who are the most radical and the most dangerous. In this case, the Hamas supporters. Criminalize anyone who would ask just why a community in the West should be expected to contain people who support Hamas. Take them to jail for asking that question on tape. And the second way to lower community tensions is to recognize that those very people who defend Hamas are a danger to your community. That the problem isn't community quiescence, but the constituency of the community itself. That there cannot be community with people who root for Hamas. This should be obvious, but it isn't. It isn't because the West simply refuses to look reality in the face. Better to arrest people who speak that reality than to look reality in the face. Because reality is ugly, and reality is unpleasant, and reality might require you to recognize that the importation of millions of people who hate the West was an awful, terrible idea, and that means should be taken to reverse that process. And so instead, a way has to be found to pretend to weigh the threat. Blame it on Israel. Jabber about the two-state solution. Talk about Islamophobia. Whatever you do, do not look the realities of multiculturalism's dramatic failure directly in the face. Don't do it. This, of course, plays directly into the hands of Hamas. They now understand that they can say and do literally anything, and that much of the West will cover for them in order to maintain the fiction that multiculturalism works. They don't even bother to hide the ball. They know that you are stupid and or weak. They'll say it directly out to your face. They understand that you will just pretend they didn't say it. That you will pretend to misunderstand them. That you will, in fact, grant credibility to people who cheer for them in the streets. Here is Hamas official Ghazi Hamad speaking just 1 week ago on Lebanese TV, calling for attacks on Jewish civilians until Israel is extirpated. He says, we'll repeat October 7th over and over and over. He says Israel is a country that has no place on our land. We must remove that country because it constitutes a security, military, and political catastrophe to the Arab and Islamic nation and must be finished. We are not ashamed to say this with full force. We must teach Israel a lesson, and we will do this again and again. The Al-Aqsa flood is just the first time. There will be a second, a third, a fourth, because we have the determination, the resolve, the capabilities to fight. Will we have to pay a price? Yes, and we are ready to pay it. We are called a nation of martyrs, and we are proud to sacrifice martyrs.
I lost every single person except for
We did not want to harm civilians. That's a lie, obviously. But there were complications on the ground. And there was a party in the area with civilian population. There's a large area across 40 kilometers. The occupation must come to an end. Occupation where? In the Gaza Strip? No, I'm talking about all the Palestinian lands. Does that mean the annihilation of Israel? Yes, of course. The existence of Israel is illogical. The existence of Israel is what causes all that pain, blood, and tears. It is Israel, not us. We are the victims of the occupation, period. They murder 1,400 Jews. They burn babies in ovens. And then they tell you that they want to do it again and again and again. Operation Al-Aqsa Flood is the name of what they did. That is literally the name of what they did. And they're saying they want to do it over and over and over again. And by the way, there are polls showing that there's wide and broad support for this in Muslim countries across the world, pretending that you can import a bunch of people who agree with Hamas, and this is not somehow going to have some impact on your community, is simply insane. It's totally crazy. In every available way, it's totally nuts. So, for example, there's a recent poll showing 1 in 3 in Lebanon currently favor war with Israel. The poll found broad support for Hamas terror organization, the Hamas terror operation called Operation Al-Aqsa Flood. Of the 400 individuals polled in Lebanon, 80% supported what Hamas did. 80% in Lebanon. 80%.
That is pretty fucked
And by the way, if you look in other countries, very similar numbers. The group wishing to condemn Israel is comprised of 97% of Shiite respondents, 84% of Sunni respondents, 55% of Christian Lebanese respondents, and 75% of Druze respondents.
Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.
Yesterday, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, was testifying before Congress, and here's what he had to say about what he had seen Hamas do.
A family of 4, a young boy and girl, 6 and 8 years old, and their parents around the breakfast table. The father, his eye gouged out in front of his kids. The mother's breast cut off. The girl's foot amputated. The boy's fingers cut off before they were executed. And then their executioners sat down and had a meal. That's what this society is dealing with.
Yeah, that shit's fucked up.
And no nation could tolerate that.
Like, what
and
the
as
fuck?
we've said repeatedly, as President Biden has repeatedly made clear, Israel has not only the right, but the obligation to defend itself and to try to take every possible step to make sure this doesn't happen again.
So he's testifying about that, and he's completely correct. What did the media focus on? They didn't focus on what Blinken actually had to say. What they focused on is protesters disrupting Blinken. Now, again, these protesters are garbage human beings and morons. What they're doing is they sat in the back of the room holding up their hands,
I saw
stained
this. This
red
looks
with
weird
ink,
as fuck.
to suggest that Tony Blinken has blood on his hands. Now, they wouldn't do this with regard to Hamas. And I just will point out here an odd and disturbing parallel. Here are all these people holding up their red hands to show that America has blood on its hands or whatever the hell that is. But here's a little bit of the video.
Collins, distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify before you today.
Populated areas. Stop supporting the genocide and ethnic cleansing of the people of Gaza. Cease fire now. Save the children of Gaza. Save the children of
What the fuck, bro?
Not in the face of an intensifying strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific and around the world.
Permanently unemployable idiots at best. Evil, genocidal, anti-Semites at worst. It's despicable people. Anyway, there is an odd echo, odd historical echo here. And the people holding up their red hands to the camera. Last time I saw hands that red, it's when there were, you know, actual members of the Palestinian Authority holding up their red hands after having butchered an Israeli soldier who mistakenly drove into Ramallah. I mean, it's hard not to see that particular picture. That picture was pretty famous back in the day. By the way, this administration is now talking about giving the Palestinian Authority control over the Gaza Strip, which is the Palestinian Authority is literally paying the families of the terrorists who murdered people in the Gaza envelope. So that would just be kind of changing one horse for the same horse of a slightly different color. That's what the Biden administration is now talking about. Now, the question is, will the Biden administration go weak-kneed on all of this because of all of the press coverage and because of the supposed internal dissent, despite the fact that, again, the polling data in the United States suggests broad and wide support for Israel in this conflict? With all this turmoil in the world, with the economy on tenterhooks, with it seeming as though everything is chaotic, you might want to diversify into something that has never been worth zero. You might want to diversify into precious metals the same way that I do. We keep on spending and spending and spending and spending. And Joe Biden's going to keep spending and spending. The devaluation of the dollar is coming. Everyone knows this. We have $35 trillion in national debt. Protect your savings today by diversifying into gold with the help of Birch Gold Group. Here's the best part. When you open an IRA with Birch Gold, for every $10,000 you spend by December 22nd, Birch Gold will send you a free gold bar. Just text Ben to 989898 to claim eligibility before Black Friday. Birch Gold can even help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold without taking any money out of pocket. And you still get those free gold bars with an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, thousands of satisfied customers. You can count on Birch Gold to help you transition existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. Don't let your savings fall victim to the further devaluation of the dollar. Text Ben to 989898. Receive that free info kit on gold. Claim your eligibility before Black Friday. Receive free gold bars on your qualifying purchase. That's Ben to 989898.
All right, I'm going to be done for the day.
Let's talk about sleep quality. So, poor sleep quality, as we know, can cause weight gain.
All right, I'll see you guys later. I'll see you tomorrow. Doses.